The manhwa opens with a girl lies in bed, staring silently at the ceiling. She keeps staring for a while longer before sitting upright and clutching her head. Internally, she screams, thinking about how she still isn't used to the fact that she's possessed a character in a novel who's doomed to die soon. Just 2 years ago, it had been an ordinary day, and she was simply coming home from work. She was an ordinary woman named Lee Soo-yeon. As she took off her shoes, she complained about how tired she was. Then, she noticed that something had updated on her phone. A few moments later, she was lying in bed, excited to read the newest chapter of her favorite novel. Humming happily to herself, she scrolled through the story. The final battle was taking place. The novel she was reading was a fantasy story about a woman's revenge. The main character was named Renee Delahame, whose sister had been killed by her lover, the Emperor. Her entire family and estate had been destroyed as well, so to avenge them, she changed her identity and secretly entered the palace. While living there, she waited patiently for her chance to kill the Emperor, but she eventually discovered the cruel suffering her sister endured in the palace. She also witnessed the Empire's deep corruption and would later rise as the leader of a rebellion. Our modern-day protagonist was now reading the climax, the final confrontation between Renee and the Emperor. In the end, Renee killed him, and that made our reader jump in excitement. She shouted that this was exactly the reason she stayed up late every night and worked so hard to see this moment. She cheered for Renee and thought that now, at last, she just needed to find her happiness. But the story didn't turn out the way she expected. After Renee killed the Emperor, something strange happened to his body. The reader's eyes widened. There was a calamity sealed inside the Emperor, and the moment he died, it was unleashed. As the calamity spread, the world began to collapse. Crops withered from lack of rain, and the earth cracked apart. Deadly diseases spread through cities, and not a single day passed without hundreds dying. Corpses polluted the rivers, and the skies darkened with swarms of black insects. It was truly the end of the world. Our reader sat up in disbelief, shocked that the story ended like this. She argued that Renee had done nothing wrong. Of course she had to kill that tyrant who ruined the land. But now everything had ended in destruction. Furious, she threw her hands in the air, shouting about how she had wasted her time and money on such a story. She questioned whether the author understood that good was supposed to triumph over evil. She fumed, wondering why the Emperor wasn't the real final boss and why the calamity had to spread. Still grumbling, she yanked her blanket over herself and muttered that she could have written the story better. Then, she drifted off to sleep. In the darkness, a bright light appeared and a voice asked her to give it a try. Her eyes snapped open. She bolted upright in bed, her eyes wide as she looked around a completely different room. She froze, stunned to see a wooden ceiling and stone walls. Touching her face, she muttered in confusion, asking what was going on and where she was. The body she now inhabited was named Amelie Bourbon, the younger sister of Renee. Amelie was the very character whose death became the reason Renee sought revenge. She was also the Emperor's neglected lover, who was mercilessly killed. The protagonist immediately realized she was the girl who dies at the beginning. Worse yet, she wasn't even shown properly in the story, not even as a corpse. She yelled in frustration, saying all she did was complain a little about the novel, and that alone was enough to drag her into this world. She demanded to know why other people who criticize stories online don't end up like this. Clutching her head, she realized how much trouble she was in. Amelie's life was nothing but misery. In the original story, the tyrant emperor met Amelie during a hunt and fell in love at first sight. He took her to the palace, locked her up like a bird in a cage, and quickly grew bored of her. Even the maids mocked her. Eventually, she was killed by the emperor's own hands. But her death wasn't the end. Her family, the Delahames, were later framed for treason, and everyone in the estate was executed. This was what drove Renee to take her revenge in the first place. Now, the protagonist, trapped in Amelie's body, was teary-eyed. She whispered that she was scared. Burying her face in the pillow, she cried that she didn't want to die or be bullied. She wondered why she had to be reborn as a character destined to die so soon. After a while, she sat up, realizing that crying wouldn't solve anything. She needed a plan. She remembered that in the original story, Amelie met the prince before winter ended and then went to the palace. That meant she had two choices now: either follow the original timeline and use her knowledge of the story to her advantage, or run away as far as possible and never look back. She chose the second option. The novel's events wouldn't start for another year anyway, so her knowledge wouldn't help right now. She reminded herself that the emperor was a cruel and unpredictable man who hunted people for sport, tortured the queen, and committed all kinds of evil acts. Amelie decided that if she wanted to live, she had to escape. She also realized she couldn't act like the real Amelie. The original one was nothing but a walking death flag. Still, there was one bit of good news: she had all of Amelie's memories. Taking a deep breath, she looked toward the large bookshelf in front of her and decided she needed to get out of here. Amelie starts pulling books off the bookshelf before realizing something surprising: the real Amelie Bourbon was actually a witch. In this world, witches are known as priests who serve God and use special spells granted from the heavens. Their powers are passed down maternally, only to young girls. However, information about witches is scarce since they live in isolation. 20 years ago, witch hunts had spread across the world, forcing them to hide their existence even more. Now, Amelie flips through books, searching for anything related to witches and God. She eyes the shelf suspiciously, wondering if an elderly witch arranged it, because the first book is a children's story followed by 3 heavy books about magical physics. She picks up the children's book and mutters that this seems to be just her level. Honestly, relatable. As she flips through the pages, she wonders if reading will really change anything. The book instructs her to relax and imagine picking something up. As she follows along, something shocks her. A book suddenly rises into the air. It floats for a moment before crashing down onto the floor. Amelie jumps and screams, "What the heck?" She stares at it, wide-eyed, wondering if she was the one who made it float. She remembers that magic is supposed to come naturally to witches and hesitantly wonders if it's really that easy. Before long, a pile of books lands on the floor as Amelie hurriedly packs them up. She tells herself that with this much knowledge, she can live anywhere. She recalls that in the novel, doctors and priests charged outrageous fees and often refused to treat commoners, so many people turned to witches for help instead. Women, in particular, preferred witches since most doctors were men. Amelie notes that although witches are persecuted publicly, they're still in high demand underground. That means she shouldn't have to worry about starving. Still, she has no idea when the tyrant might appear here. She pushes open the door, determined to leave before he arrives. Closing it behind her, she quietly says goodbye to the house she had barely gotten used to. A moment of silence passes before Amelie bursts back inside, terrified. The forest outside is pitch black and way too scary. The real Amelie's memories, she thinks, are turning out to be completely useless. Our protagonist groans. The real Amelie was a total airhead who couldn't use magic and never left the forest until the tyrant showed up. Struggling to carry the books, Amelie realizes it'll be too dangerous to travel alone. Even if she tried to use the books as weapons, she has no idea how she'd find food or shelter. She decides she needs to learn more about how this world works first. Sitting back down on the bed, she takes a deep breath and thinks calmly. She decides to look for anything in the house that might be worth selling for money enough to buy food. She also decides she needs to practice magic before leaving and gives herself a strict deadline, 2 weeks. Amelie declares that she'll finish her preparations and leave within 2 weeks. That way, there'll be no chance of running into the Emperor. A time skip of 2 weeks later, we see Amelie's feet lifted off the ground. She proudly notes that though it was hard, she can now fly with no problem. She's even managed to earn a basket of apples. In a nearby village, a kind lady mistook her for a broom-sweeping volunteer and gave her apples as thanks. But she also overheard people gossiping about witches, saying they were afraid of catching some weird curse from them. Back home, Amelie slams the door shut and pouts, muttering that those people don't even know what they're talking about. Over the past 2 weeks, she's mastered basic magic, including psychokinesis, which lets her move things without touching them. She's also learned transformation magic and how to make medicine. Amelie has now fully accepted that she is Amelie Bourbon. As she washes her face, she remembers how she used to get startled by her reflection but eventually got used to it. She then stares at a bucket, wondering if she should tell her family that she's leaving. She also remembers that, if her memory is right, the Emperor should be somewhere near the woods right now. Her family is close by too, and she doesn't want to disappear without saying anything, especially since she knows how much Renee loves her little sister. In her previous life, our protagonist had no family. She never knew her parents. When she was young, she had been found wandering the streets alone before someone took her to the police. Since no one could find her parents, she was sent to a facility where she was raised and given a name. Because of that, whenever she read the novel, she could deeply relate to Renee's longing to protect her family. Amelie dries her face with a towel and mutters that she'll just visit them for a bit before leaving. She imagines showing off her new magic, moving boulders, transforming, and proving that she can take care of herself so they won't worry. She ties her hair back and wonders if her family will let her go if she shows them she's capable. That would be much better than just sending a letter. Now fully prepared, Amelie takes a deep breath, determined to finish everything on a high note. Cool wind blows through the sky as we see Amelie flying on her broom before she shouts, "Wah!" She has arrived at her Count Father's land, which she notes looks big and cozy. As she steps off the broom, she groans about how much her butt hurts. She then looks at the door and tells herself to just greet them and leave. She knocks on the door as silence follows before a blond man, breathing heavily, opens it and begs for forgiveness. He then quietly says Amelie's name, and she mutters something back. She wonders what's with this reaction and if it was a mistake to come visit. The man then tells her that father was actually expecting someone else. Just then, a blonde woman also notices Amelie is there, and Amelie realizes that this is Renee Delahame. Amelie also thinks the same thing as she bows and says she came to say hello. As Amelie speaks, the pair cover their faces in shock at the fact that Amelie came to visit them. This makes Amelie say, in confusion. Her father then calls her name as he rushes in to give her a hug. He cries, saying he can't believe she came home and that he's so happy. He also says he was so worried after leaving her in a shed, while Amelie struggles to breathe because of his tight hug. Renee then pulls him aside, telling him to let her breathe and that they should listen to what Amelie has to say. He agrees, saying Renee is right, and apologizes to Amelie, explaining that it's just because he was so happy to see her. Amelie wonders to herself if the Count was always like this, since the memories she has of him are of a dignified gentleman, not this soft puppy. He then takes her hand and tells her to come inside for now as there's much to talk about. He asks if she has eaten yet and says it would be nice if they all ate together. He also points out that of all times to visit, she came when they were expecting a guest. As she looks at her family's faces, she wonders why they seem so nervous about this guest and who it could be. Amelie then thinks this must be really bad timing and tells them she'll just come back later, but her father grabs her and says it's fine and not to worry. He tells her to just stay in her room for a bit, as the guest will only be here for a day, so there's no chance she'll run into him. He says he can't just send her back after she came to visit for the first time in 14 years. She then asks who the guest is, and he starts to reply, but a maid rushes in saying that His Majesty is entering the main gate, shocking the family. Amelie's eyes widen as she hears the word Majesty and immediately realizes that this must be Serwin Hanisha. She thinks to herself that this is impossible. She thought he'd be in the forest or leading right now, not coming to the estate. A butler calls for her sister and father to come and tells everyone else to get in position. He then pushes Amelie toward a room while telling everyone to hurry. Her father tells her that they'll talk later and apologizes that this had to happen when she finally came to visit. He hugs her again, saying he's just worried because the Emperor is dangerous and he doesn't want anything to happen. He also tells her that her family has never been ashamed of her. Amelie replies that she understands and asks him to let go. When Amelie left the estate, she took her mother's name and, on paper, is not part of the estate or nobility. She decides that there's no point in drawing attention, especially around the Emperor. She starts to run quickly to the room. As she reaches the door, she grabs the handle but realizes it's locked and that she might be in trouble. She wonders what to do just as the door slowly opens for the Emperor. She notices there's nowhere to hide except a plant pot beside her. An idea suddenly clicks in her mind as magic begins to swirl around her feet. A poof sound is heard as a white cloud appears. Feathers fall to the floor, revealing that Amelie has turned into a bird. Suddenly, it's announced that His Majesty has arrived as his shadow spreads across the room floor. As he slowly steps inside, we see Amelie as a nervous bird, wondering if she'll be discovered. Renee and the father both bow nervously as the cruel Emperor stares at them. Her father greets the Emperor, calls him Count Delahame. The Emperor informs him that he would not come here without bringing a gift before dropping a bag to the floor. This utterly shocks Renee and the father as they see blood seeping out of the bag. After the father stares at the bag, the father looks up and asks about the group of people standing behind the Emperor. The Emperor tells him they are a group of thieves that he ran to on the way here that asked for road tolls. Instead of giving money, the Emperor decided to fill the bag with the head of the leader. The father wonders why the Emperor brought this here before the Emperor mentions that the leader did not know his place and resisted. For this reason, the Emperor decided to capture all the robbers and was hoping Count Delahame could dispose of them for him. He wants them to be executed in accordance with the law, to which Count Delahame does mention that the law rules that bandits must get the death penalty. Count Delahame then bows down and says that since these people were in his domain, he will be responsible for them. We see that Amelie, who is still a bird, is shocked by the sight of blood. She covers her face with her wings as she is scared, since those arms are the same ones that choke the real Amelie out. She then gets even more scared thinking about the look in the Emperor's eyes. She begins to run as she feels bloodlust. As she does so, she sees the Emperor and they both make eye contact. Amelie gets shocked and wonders what is happening. She internally screams as she wonders if he really saw her by coincidence all the way across the room. Kinda of suspicious. She then tells herself there is no way a human can see her this far away and tells herself that nothing is wrong and that she will leave when Serwin disappears. As Count Delahaim offers to guide the Emperor to a room, the Emperor begins to start walking on his own accord. The Count wonders what the crazy Emperor will do now as he thinks the Emperor is walking towards nothing. He then gets shocked as the Emperor is moving towards the door with Amelie and then shouts, "Your Majesty." He screams no as the Emperor continues to walk. Suddenly Serwin kicks the plant pot and exposes a bird that is covering up with her wings. This shocks Amelie as Serwin stares at her before the plant pot comes crashing down. The Count is confused that there is a bird in here before slowly realizing that this must be Amelie. He starts to run towards his daughter, but Renee grabs him. She is shaking her head to tell him no as the Count realizes Renee caught on as well. The Count is now nervous as he wonders what is happening. Amelie lets out a tweet as Serwin's hand starts to approach her. He grabs her as she begins to cuss at him in bird lingo. She stares at him as she feels his bloodlust. She is very scared and wonders if she will make it out alive. The Emperor then brings her closer to his face, which shocks her. This even confuses her family as they stare from behind. Serwin's guard starts walking towards him confused as well. Serwin stares at the bird and asks if he was mistaken as he thought this smell was of something else. Amelie is in tears as she wants to run away but is trapped in Serwin's hands and is getting sniffed. The Count decides in his mind to step in and save his daughter and calls for His Majesty. He then asks for Serwin to let the bird go, but Serwin tells him to please lead him to a room as he is tired. Renee then also steps in asking His Majesty that their family greatly treasures that bird and pleading for him to let it go as well. Serwin stares in silence before asking Renee if she knows how to use a sword. She is confused but bows down saying yes, but also says that she lacks a lot of skill. Serwin lets out a smile as Bird Amelie notes that this is bad. She notes that Serwin is most dangerous when he is grinning as he only does this when he is very irritated with things around him and won't hold back. She internally shouts, "Oh no." Amelie ponders about how the main character, Renee, is a righteous person who is also kind and strong-willed, someone who would fight alone for the sake of her people and for honor. She stares at the Emperor, thinking Renee is not someone jerks like him should take their anger out on. She then starts pecking at Serwin's hand, saying, "Take this." The wild Amelie is using the Pokemon move Provoke on the Emperor, and while it is not very effective, at least she is drawing his attention. She uses her body to signal her family not to come closer as she will handle this herself. Renee and the Count stare at each other in silence. They bow before Renee tells the Emperor she will guide him to his chambers. She also says that his knights will be shown the way by servants. The Emperor then turns and begins walking away. As he walks, Bird Amelie thinks about how the real Amelie once met this man while he was hunting and soon after met her death upon entering the palace. She also notes that just by meeting him, the real Amelie's life became so miserable. The Emperor enters his room, and imaginary chains appear across the doorway as the door slams shut. Inside, the Emperor walks toward a table before placing Amelie on top of it. Amelie starts checking her wings to see if they are all right and complains that she thought she would die from the awful smell. At least she feels relieved now that Serwin is away from her family, so they should be safe. She also notices that, by coincidence, the balcony doors have been left open perfect for her to escape. She decides to take this chance, otherwise, she might never get another opportunity. She jumps up to fly and shouts that she's leaving. But just then, something red suddenly appears, grabs her feet, and pulls her back down to the ground. As she cries out that she's falling, she lands right into Serwin's arms. She then stares at her feet, wondering what is on them. Serwin tells her, "You really don't stay still, do you?" That's when Amelie realizes it was the Emperor's aura. The red aura also shuts the balcony doors, making Amelie shout no. Serwin tells her that it is dangerous outside, while Amelie thinks to herself that being with him is far more dangerous than the outside world. She chirps and flaps her wings, letting out a loud cry, while Serwin pats her head. He tells her to just stay still. A knock comes at the door, and Serwin opens a birdcage. He gently puts Amelie inside and tells her he will be back. Someone outside is speaking to the Emperor as Amelie wonders what just happened. She is confused why he patted her head instead of hitting her, and she wonders if this is really the true Serwin. She grabs at her head, uncertain about how things are progressing. Later that night, she notes that it feels warm and comfortable right now. But then she suddenly wakes up and wonders what happened before she fell asleep. She sees the Emperor and lets out a chirp. He is rubbing her with a towel. She wonders when she fell asleep and calls herself crazy for dozing off here. She jumps from his hand onto the table. He pokes her, telling her to be careful, and she lets out a loud chirp. Serwin is left speechless as Amelie begins struggling inside the birdcage. Amelie stares at him nervously, wondering if he plans to keep her in the palace as a bird. She then calms herself, thinking it will be fine since she has magic. She just needs to wait for the right chance to escape. As Serwin watches her, another knock comes at the door, and someone calls for His Majesty. The person introduces himself as Eden, and Serwin tells him to enter. Eden comes in and tells the Emperor that the knights have been ordered to stay in their respective rooms. He also says that Sir Chad has been told to return, and asks if the Emperor wants to hear Chad's report before leaving. Serwin says he does, and that they will have to wait for Chad to arrive. Eden replies that he understands. Amelie is confused that Serwin sent someone to investigate the Count, since in the novel Serwin was only supposed to be focused on hunting at this point. She wonders if maybe the Emperor always receives a report before hunting, since he is the Emperor after all, but still, something feels wrong. Serwin then asks about the Count's reaction. Eden replies that the Count probably suspects they are not here just to hunt, but still doesn't know their true reason for being here. The Emperor tells him that the Count must never find out, which shocks Amelie. She shouts, "What?" as she realizes the Emperor actually has a different objective and is not here to hunt at all, meaning events are happening differently from how the novel originally went. Amelie there suddenly remembers that, in the original novel, Renee had assumed the Emperor came to the forest to hunt, but that had never been the case. She finds it strange, considering Fidelia Forest holds no unusual beasts worth hunting. Serwin would have had to cross 2 magical barriers just to reach this place when there is already a proper hunting ground nearby. This makes her wonder what his true purpose here could be, and how he was supposed to meet Amelie in the original story. In the novel, Renee first encountered Serwin after joining the Knights to seek revenge, yet in this timeline, they have already met. The inconsistency makes Amelie's head throb as she tries to understand why events are unfolding so differently from the novel. She then stiffens and mutters softly in disbelief when she realizes Serwin is staring directly at her with a chilling expression. Terrified, she collapses to the floor. Serwin casually tells his men that the bird appears to be afraid of him. One of the knights agrees, quietly wondering if the Emperor intends to keep the creature. Serwin asks why the bird seems so frightened, and the man silently questions whether the Emperor truly doesn't understand the reason. As Amelie struggles inside the birdcage, Serwin remarks that she seems quite lively, while his aide mutters that ordinary people would call this terrified. The aide then asks if His Majesty intends to raise the bird, noting that it will likely die soon anyway. Serwin disagrees, saying that the bird looks perfectly fine and even healthy. Inside, Amelie screams for him not to keep her. Serwin begins contemplating how to make the bird less afraid of him. His aide reminds him that the Emperor loves animals and asks if he even knows how to tame one. Serwin replies that, for some reason, whenever he keeps animals near him, they always die quickly. He vows to raise this one properly. The aide advises that animals are tamed with food, and Serwin immediately orders him to fetch something for the bird to eat. The aide, startled, asks if he means right now, and Serwin answers firmly immediately. A short while later, a basket of food is placed on the table. The aide announces that it contains dry grains, chocolate cake, and chicken soup. Serwin raises a brow and asks if the aide told them to pack a picnic basket as well. The aide sheepishly explains that he had asked the butler what birds usually eat, and the butler simply began packing anything he could find. Amelie's eyes lock onto the bowl of steaming chicken soup. For a moment, she thinks of her family, then freezes, realizing that eating chicken as a bird might count as cannibalism. Serwin comments that her previous owner must have cared deeply for her, then picks up a knife. The gesture makes Amelie's feathers stand on end. As he slices an apple, he glances at her and asks if she feels uncomfortable, while she flails frantically in the cage and his aide facepalms in silent despair. Amelie's heart pounds as she imagines her head being chopped off. But instead of harming her, Serwin offers her a slice of apple. Suspicious, she hesitates, wondering if this is some kind of trap. Perhaps he's waiting for her to take the bait so he can kill her afterward. Suddenly, a loud growl echoes through the room. Serwin looks around and asks if that sound came from the bird's stomach, and his aide awkwardly says he isn't sure. Amelie, blushing furiously, realizes how embarrassing this is. She hasn't eaten anything since morning. Completely drained of energy, she feels herself being tempted by the delicious aroma of food. She insists to herself that she mustn't eat. If she accidentally pecks his finger, he might kill her on the spot. Yet as she drools helplessly, she decides that if she's going to die anyway, she might as well eat first. With one big gulp of resolve, she begins pecking at the apple. To her surprise, it tastes heavenly far better than the convenience store apples she used to eat. Maybe it's just the stress, but this apple feels like the best thing she's ever had. Serwin watches her and comments that she eats well before offering her a plump green grape. The sudden gift makes her choke in shock. Serwin turns to his aide, wondering why the bird still seems nervous even after he has fed it. The aide patiently explains that they've only known each other for an hour. Amelie then realizes she's somehow ended up in Serwin's hand and guesses she must have been too hungry to resist. The aide adds that smaller animals take time to bond, and Serwin gently pats her head, saying he understands. Now determined, he notes that this will require patience and effort. Amelie looks up at him, puzzled by the softened expression on his face. The aide quietly observes that His Majesty seems quite pleased with the bird, and Serwin admits that he can't seem to take his eyes off it. Amelie is stunned, wondering why such a terrifying man could possibly like her. A knock suddenly interrupts the scene as Chad arrives. The Emperor orders him to enter and places the bird back on the table. A man kneels before him, explaining that he was following orders but came immediately when he heard the Emperor was here. Amelie tilts her head, wondering who this poorly dressed knight is. Serwin asks if the man has found it, leaving Amelie confused about what it refers to until Serwin clarifies by asking if he has found the witch. Amelie freezes in horror, realizing that they are searching for a witch. The man apologizes, admitting he has failed. Serwin's expression darkens as he grabs a nearby vase and hurls it at the man's head. Amelie gasps in shock as the knight collapses, bleeding, yet continues to beg for punishment instead of forgiveness. Serwin contemplates the word punishment and glances toward his aide's sword, making Amelie panic at the thought that he might kill the man right here. She grabs the cage bars, shouting internally for Serwin to stop and cursing him under her breath. The aide intervenes, asking Chad to explain the situation and confirm whether he verified the existence of a witch living within the castle walls. Chad, trembling, says it was exactly as he had reported. Since his arrival, he had heard constant rumors of a witch residing within the castle. To summarize, Sir Chad had come to the Delahame estate disguised as a shepherd to locate the witch's dwelling. His initial target had been somewhere in Fidelia Forest, but while visiting a restaurant, he overheard locals speaking of a witch in the area. Though uncertain of the truth, he found that day by day, more villagers spoke of sightings of a witch passing by. Because the Delahame kingdom, unlike the capital, is far more accepting of witches, it seemed plausible that one could be living openly among the people rather than hiding deep within the woods. For this reason, Sir Chad changed his focus and began searching within the castle borders. He adds that reliable information on witches is nearly impossible to obtain since witches are notoriously aloof and distrustful of strangers. Amelie's stomach sinks as she realizes her repeated trips in and out of town may have caused this entire situation. Renee isn't supposed to meet the Emperor yet, and she certainly didn't expect a knight to be here searching for her. Serwin demands to know if Chad found nothing, and when the knight admits failure again, Serwin coldly orders him to go to the village and find the witch's location or end up a corpse. Amelie is horrified by the Emperor's cruelty. Chad promises to live up to expectations this time and repeatedly thanks His Majesty, even as blood trickles down his face. The aide takes hold of Chad and assures the Emperor that he will handle him personally before leading him out. The door slams shut, leaving Amelie staring in disbelief. She can't understand how someone who just lost so much blood could still express gratitude to the man who nearly killed him. Her mind races as she recalls how Serwin committed far worse atrocities in the novel. Now, seeing it firsthand, she can no longer deny that he truly is a tyranny villain through and through. She realizes how foolish she was to forget this for even a moment when he was feeding her. The truth returns to her sharply. No matter how charming he might seem, evil will never be desirable. We see a few days later Amelie is seen lying in the cage on a pillow, noting that she has failed to escape for a sixth time. As she lays dejected, she recalls in the past wishing to be reincarnated as an animal but does not want to have to watch people get hurt. The aide then talks about how the bird is acting very human-like as Amelie is so tired of the atmosphere and just wants to leave soon. She calls the aide a jerk for not letting her go as she kicks away the apple slice he is attempting to feed her. She tells herself that she hates everything about this guy and the Emperor. In the previous night, we see Amelie plotting to escape while everyone is asleep. However, she sees that the Emperor just won't go to sleep. She sits thinking he'll eventually go to sleep after he is done reading. The pages flutter as he continues to keep on reading through the night as Amelie slowly falls asleep. She falls dead asleep as the pages on the desk pile sky high. She wakes up when Eden arrives at the room and realizes that the punk emperor stayed up all night. She wonders why he didn't just go to the imperial palace if he had so much work and chose to stay with her instead. She then decides to just go back to sleep then. Eden, who turns out to be the head of the Imperial Knights, asks if she is asleep. He is clearly annoyed that he came here on a secret mission with Serwin but ended up peeling chestnuts for a bird. He notes that the bird is cute, but there is nothing special about it. As he sits and stares at her sleep, he notes that the Emperor generally avoids creatures that are small and weak like her. A slam can be heard as His Majesty rushes in the room asking about the bird. Eden says it is asleep, to which Serwin is surprised it is sleeping again. Serwin says the bird appears to be getting weaker, to which Eden agrees, but the truth is this is due to Amelie staying up all night. Eden says the bird was not eating much, so he got it a worm, but it passed out without taking a bite as Serwin pokes Amelie. He wonders if the bird got affected by him to the point it grew weak in only a few days. Eden says small animals are more sensitive, so sometimes a good environment for humans may not be good for small creatures. Serwin then notes that he thought this bird would have been fine for some reason. Eden then says that the Delahame family has been asking for this bird back every day, so they must care greatly about it, to which Serwin agrees. Eden then also mentions that the Delahames have no political power but are well respected, so nothing good will come from making them their enemy. Serwin is speechless for a moment before saying that he's actually grown to care deeply for this bird over this short period. The next day, Amelie is confused, staring at her father as Eden bows, saying that he will take his leave now. She wonders what happened, as just 30 minutes ago she was plotting another escape, but Serwin just suddenly released her now. Amelie then wonders if it was useless for her to come back to the estate, since it might have been better to just run away from everything from the get-go. Maybe she should have left without even telling her family. She then remembers back to when Serwin stared at her before turning around and leaving. She feels that something is off before wishing Serwin would take the jerk Eden with him away as well. She thinks the 24-hour surveillance is too much as Eden picks up her cage. She wonders if they realize she has another escape plan and wonders where they will be keeping her now. The door closes back in the present moment as Eden leaves, having supposedly just released Amelie. Amelie wonders if this is a trap, as the moment she reverts back to a human, Serwin could jump in to expose her for being a witch. Her father then grabs her and says it's a good thing that she is back. Renee then jumps into the room, having heard Amelie had been released and that the Emperor has left. Renee then shouts Amelie's name before holding her and asking if she is alright. Amelie notes to herself she was tormented seeing what happened to the other knights, but nothing in particular happened to her. Amelie then thinks that judging from Renee's behavior this must not be a trap. She decides that now is the time to revert back into being a human again. She is elated as she is finally a human again before turning to ask her family if the Emperor really is gone. Renee tells her the Emperor seems to have gone hunting and took all the knights with him. Now realizing it was not a trap, she wonders why he let her go all of a sudden. Her family says they don't know the details, but it may be because father begged Serwin every day. The Count then says it was actually Renee who would appeal to see the bird every day. This makes Amelie gasp at what her family did for her. She stares at them both, wondering why they would go to this extent for her before they tell her they were worried for her as she was in the Emperor's hands. She then tells them that she really was never in any actual danger though, to which Renee says that is a relief. Renee noted that the Emperor's mood seemed to be getting a lot worse, so her family got very worried for her. Amelie is speechless before saying what. She thinks about how a lot of trouble could have come to her family for inconveniencing the Emperor, yet they did not care as long as she was safe. The Count says it is a relief that Amelie is safe and sound as they tell her welcome home and give her a heartwarming family hug. Amelie then wonders to herself if this is what having a family is like. She says that it's a relief that they are safe as well before there is a knock on the door. The butler comes in saying Amelie appears to have not eaten well, so he has brought snacks. She tells him thank you for this and for the food basket as well. The butler says he will take his leave as Amelie wonders if this is the elderly butler who's been working here since Renee and Amelie had been born. He also cared a lot for Amelie but was in no position to talk to the Emperor. Amelie notes to herself that these are all good people as Renee tries to get Amelie to try all the snacks. Something comes into Amelie's mind just then. She just remembered that the real Amelie was a mute who could not talk, so why is everyone acting as if nothing had changed? Amelie then asks them if they find something off. They both smile gleefully at her as they ask what she means. Amelie is struggling to say it because she hopes all their kindness isn't a bluff but has to be straightforward. She tells them that they both know how hard it was for her to speak and move back then, and then asks if they find it strange seeing that she's changed this much now. Her father tells her that a few days before the witch that raised her passed away, she had a word with him. He tells Amelie that they both talked about her. Her father continues that he could not fully understand what the witch was saying, but was able to piece together that the witch promised to turn Amelie back to normal. Amelie asks her father if he just said back to normal, to which he says yes, he did. She then thinks about how this body was disabled from birth, so what does he mean by back to normal? Her father then lets out a tear, saying that after seeing Amelie today, everything now makes sense, and that thanks to the witch they can all laugh and talk together. Amelie lets out an awkward laugh before Renee says the woman was a grand witch, so she must have found the solution, to which Amelie asks if Renee heard the story as well. Renee recalls the witch saying it would be very difficult magic and to take care of Amelie in her stead. Amelie then asks how returning her back to normal was possible, to which her father says he and Renee have no clue about magic. Amelie then wonders if this witch was the one responsible for her transmigration into Amelie's body and wonders what magic the witch used. Amelie then tells the two that another witch might know. She tells her family that she's made up her mind to travel, so she'll take this opportunity to find other witches. Unlike the magic that everyone can use when they have a mana stone, witches are able to use their own witchcraft. Amelie decides that she needs to meet more of her kind to know what happened to her. She not only wants to know what happened to her, but also wants to find a way to return to her original body. Her family questions her about what she just said and asks if she really plans on leaving Delahane County, to which she tells them that her main purpose coming here was to say farewell. Her father then shouts, telling her that leaving Delahane County is something he will absolutely not let her do. She stares at her father before he grabs her hand and apologizes for raising his voice and tells her that she should think carefully before traveling. He also tells her that it hasn't been that long since she returned and would be a shame if she left so quickly. She then tells him that His Majesty is here as well, and it will be a problem if she's noticed, as her social status is ambiguous. Her father reassures her that His Majesty will go back to the palace soon. Renee also tells Amelie that she does not need to rush and that Renee herself wants to spend more time with Amelie before sending her off. Renee continues that the estate is large, so avoiding His Majesty will not be too hard. Amelie notes that her family is not wrong and that the knights are probably monitoring the sky as well, especially since they know that witches are capable of flight. She notes that it's not possible to escape by broom with the surveillance, and as a bird she'd have no stamina and move around very conspicuously. All is to say, she decides to hide out here until His Majesty leaves and tells her family that. They both are overjoyed as they tell her this is a great idea. She wonders to herself if she has been too anxious lately and tells herself that things should end up fine. The next day we see Amelie and Renee going out for a walk, as Renee tells Amelie to have lunch over there, to which Amelie joyfully tells her okay. Renee says that Amelie must be really hungry as she places down the food basket, to which Amelie says of course. Amelie notes that she is so exhausted due to Renee making her try on so many dresses. Renee asks Amelie how she could be tired already, as Renee has waited for this opportunity for so long. Renee asks Amelie if Amelie knows how happy she is to be with her and spend time together like this. Amelie then is shocked at the assortment of food and tea on the table. Renee says she told the kitchen staff to prepare this for their walk, to which Amelie says she really likes it. Amelie says the food here is the best, as Renee smiles in silence. As Amelie munches on a pastry, Renee begins to talk about Amelie's plan to travel. She asks if Amelie still plans to go, to which Amelie says yes. Renee says that if Amelie planned to leave due to His Majesty, Renee thinks that Amelie does not have to go at all. This shocks Amelie, as she did not realize that her motive was that obvious. Renee says she could tell from the way Amelie was acting and that she understands her reaction considering what happened with the Emperor. Renee says the Emperor will leave soon and asks why Amelie can't just avoid him like she is doing now. Amelie then tells Renee she is still worried about things and also kind of wants to take this opportunity to find other witches as well. She also tells Renee that she can use magic now, so Renee should not worry about it being dangerous, to which Renee says that is exactly why her family is concerned. Renee asks if Amelie remembers the witch hunt 20 years ago and how at that same time the regent transferred his power to His Majesty. Amelie tells herself that she knows this as the witch that raised her told her, and she read about it in the novel. Side note, but the witch that raised her is referred to as grandmother in the story. During that time period there was an old witch living in Delahane, which was far from the capital. This witch cared and tended to the people here, making many citizens indebted to her. However, other regions did not feel the same way about her, as many people are against witches, especially those that live closer to the capital. Amelie shouts that people need witches, especially the commoners who reluctantly go to witches because doctors and priests refuse to help them. Renee then asks Amelie how she thinks the nobles feel about witches, since they already have money and wealth to get things like doctors. Amelie sits in silence before Renee says her family is not saying she can't go, but they are suggesting she take time to prepare. Renee continues that Amelie should study a bit more about the world before going. She then tells her that after researching, if Amelie still has not changed her mind, she is free to leave. Renee also mentions that the places the Emperor can go to is limited, so it will be easy to avoid him. Amelie tells Renee that she is right before suddenly having a strange feeling about all this. She tells Renee that they should clean up and go for now, as Renee asks Amelie what is wrong. She tells her that she suddenly had a strange feeling and that they should never ignore a witch's instinct. A chill runs up Amelie's spine as she feels something coming before instantly poofing into a bird again. Renee holds Amelie before asking Amelie what she is doing. Just then someone asks if that is the bird's name, and Renee turns to see the Emperor riding in on a horse. He then says, so the bird's name is Amelie. Serwin has gotten off the horse as Renee tells him yes, that the bird's name is Amelie. As she holds Amelie, she asks what brings him here. He says that he was coming back after a hunt and this path is connected to the woods. He then says something about a scent as Renee asks if he left his guards to get her first, to which the Emperor says that's right as he walks right by Renee. Amelie notes that he came here alone all of a sudden and it seems like he's looking for something. She also notes that it doesn't seem like he has seen her original form yet. He then turns around and directly stares at Bird Amelie. He then reaches his hands out with an open palm. Amelie wonders what he is doing and if he is trying to get her to come to him, to which Amelie decides to turn as she does not want to. He then scarily calls for Amelie to come here, which causes her to finally agree to fly over as Renee stands shocked. She lands softly on his finger as he then proceeds to bring her closer to his nose, which annoys Amelie. She mentions that he is always eager to smell her and wonders if there is an important reason why he does so. He then tells her that the smell was definitely coming from her this time and the last time as well. He also mentions that it disappears whenever she lands on his hand. He tells her that she looks to have gotten well, as Amelie notes that he himself looks tired. He then ushers her to eat a seed while Renee looks disgusted by this scene. Later she asks Amelie what was that. Renee asks Amelie why the Emperor treats her like a pet and mentions that dressing her up to be pretty turned out to be a waste as she is in bird form. Amelie notes to herself that the Emperor returned to the manor ahead of them, so she must stay like this to hide her identity. Renee then apologizes to Amelie as despite being a swordmaster she could not sense him coming. Amelie then tries to tell Renee not to worry as she rubs Renee's face to comfort her. Amelie then thinks about that ominous feeling she felt and how it had never been this intense. As Renee walks back, Amelie thinks she probably just paid too much attention to it and decides to continue cheering Renee up. After the final meeting they had that day, Serwin has now secluded himself as he has become ill. Amelie has been roaming around the manor freely lately, as Serwin would always stay in his room, not even letting doctors in. But then Amelie sees Delahame and Fidelia Forrest and wonders if this is a dream as a flame blazes. She stares and wonders why Delahame is in flames as her heart begins to pound loudly. She turns around to see the villagers all on the floor and notes that this is terrible. She wonders what is happening before seeing Serwin standing in the distance. She notes that this is the Emperor as he turns his head around. She steps back as she wonders why he is here and why he is killing people. She thought the future had changed before Serwin let out an evil smirk, which caused Amelie to flinch before Serwin says, "There you are." He reaches his hands out as she runs away, screaming that this is not Serwin. She grabs the blanket next to her as she jolts upright in bed. Renee asks if Amelie is alright because she heard screaming before her father rushes in the room as well, asking what's wrong. He continues running over to her, saying she must have had a nightmare, before giving her a hug, to which Amelie notes it is warm. He tells her she is fine and will be safe here, as Amelie notes to herself that it was just a dream and she's here with her family now. She then wonders why she had such a dream. The next day she looks around the corner to make sure that no one is there. She notes that she was not in the right state of mind to realize it last night, but that dream must have been a vision of the future. Fortune-telling or astrology is actually a very simple skill in witchcraft and allows the user to see into the future. In some cases, a witch can see into the future without using the fortune-telling skill, and that is called the clairvoyance of the witch. Amelie at first thought that this was the future mentioned in the novel, but recalls seeing her stuff burn in the manor as well, meaning this is the near future. She wonders if the black eyes and chilling smile are the calamity that was sealed in Serwin's body. She also notes that it is strange that he's staying in his room due to illness. She then turns into a bird, deciding that she has to take a quick peek to see how he is. She lands on the balcony that she believes is Serwin's room, and as she peers through she wonders what happened to his room. It's nothing like when she was here, and notes that just being in here would make someone sick as the room needs sunlight and fresh air. She then looks at the bed to see if anything is there and spots Serwin. She then lets out a large bird noise as she wonders why he is not wearing any clothes. Amelie covers her eyes the same way I used to during a steamy scene as a kid. She notes that she's never seen such a perfectly sculpted body before. She shakes her little bird head, reminding herself this is no time to be staring. She warns herself that if someone were to catch her watching like this, she could be executed. She looks toward the window and realizes the room is too dark for her to see inside. She decides she'll need to use magic to get in. A strand of magic twists around the door handle and pulls. Amelie flaps her wings and flies into the room, pleased that it worked, noting that opening windows is easy. But then something stuns her. She freezes, wondering what in the world this is. The entire room is filled with thick black smoke. She notes that of course the Emperor would be ill, he's breathing all these fumes. But then she realizes she had opened the window and flown inside, yet he still hadn't moved. She decides it should be safe to return to her human form since he's asleep. With a poof, her body changes back, and she tells herself she'll change into a bird again once the room is cleared. She opens all the doors and windows to let the smoke out. When she's finished, she turns back and still sees the room filled with fumes. Amelie uses magic to bring in more fresh air from outside, trying to push the black smoke away. As the wind rushes through, she pauses in confusion. Something feels wrong, the smoke isn't leaving. She notices that even though it looks like smoke, it feels strangely sticky. Suddenly, the substance oozes toward her like a living symbiote. Amelie shuts her eyes and shouts for it to get away as she summons wind magic. A whirlwind whips around her, almost like a tornado, and the darkness is torn apart. Behind her, the room begins to sparkle as she turns to face the window. She realizes with alarm that the smoke didn't drift outside, it completely vanished. The Emperor suddenly flinches. Amelie stiffens, realizing she had been too loud. He's about to wake up, so she must transform back into a bird. Inside his thoughts, Serwin recognizes a scent again. It's a fragrance he had never smelled before coming to Delaheim. Ever since the calamity had been sealed inside him, this has been the only scent that gave him peace. He recalls how the first time he noticed it, the bird had been there. He had assumed the smell came from the bird, but when he picked it up and sniffed it, he couldn't sense anything. As he opens his eyes, he becomes determined to discover the true source of that scent. He blinks and sees the blurry shape of a bird. "It's you again," he says, while Amelie sighs in relief, realizing he didn't see her transform. She then flinches, noticing how pale he looks, his face covered in feverish sweat. She reassures herself that at least his eyes aren't black and cautiously reaches out to check his temperature. But then she slips. She tweets loudly as she bounces and tumbles, landing with a soft plop right onto his face. He notes how fluffy she feels as she squirms and flaps in panic. He imagines how nice it would be to raise this tiny bird. He could build a large aviary in the palace, fill it with toys and fruit trees, and surely the bird would enjoy it. But right now, the bird cannot stay here. He grabs Amelie in his hands, leaving her stunned. She thinks he probably just wants to smell her again. But then, to her shock, he lifts her up and like a Shohei Ohtani fastball hurls her straight out the window. Amelie flies through the air in complete confusion, feathers scattering as she lets out a loud peep. She wonders how he could do this after she came to help him. She vows she will get back at him for this. She thinks he must believe she won't be able to return the favor, but he is mistaken. The window slams shut behind her. "What the dash?" she shouts in bird cries, enraged as she bangs against the glass. Inside, Serwin closes the window firmly, saying, "That should do." But then he hears a loud cry. He freezes, clutching the curtain as voices echo in his mind. His eyes widen in horror as he looks down and sees the image of a dead bird on the floor. The vision tells him it's his fault calling him by name, Serwin. He sinks onto his bed as darkness seeps out of him. He admits in silence that he can no longer keep the calamity under control. He remembers how, 20 years ago, a witch tried to destroy the calamity when the seal had begun to weaken. She ultimately failed. The calamity returned, resealing itself inside him because he carried imperial blood. He recalls the witch apologizing before telling him that 20 years later he would meet another witch in Fidelia Forest who could help him. Serwin had clung to her words and waited all those years. But when he finally arrived at the witch's house, she was already dead. Covered in red horror, he realized the calamity inside him was rampaging again, waiting for the moment he would collapse into despair. Now, he feels himself nearing his limit. Once the calamity takes full control, there's no telling what he will do. Serwin dresses himself, deciding he must hide somewhere secluded. The witch's abandoned house will have to do. Later, Amelie is sobbing in her room. She sits at her desk, sniffling, scolding herself for being worried over nothing. She wonders how Serwin could throw her out like that after fawning over her so much before. She buries her face in her hands, asking why he couldn't keep his distance from her in the first place, why he had to be kind at all. She insists this is why he's a tyrant. She remembers how sick he looked and worries if he has taken any medicine. She thinks about how she could have brewed him one herself to ease his fever. Not long after, Renee enters the room and asks Amelie why she's sitting alone. She tells her to come along since it's time for dinner. Amelie admits Renee is right, she should eat something. As they walk, Renee cheerfully mentions they'll be having Amelie's favorite dish tonight, and that the chef is putting his heart and soul into it. Meanwhile, outside there's commotion with Imperial guards. Amelie walks down and asks her father what's happening. He turns to Renee and explains that His Majesty has disappeared. Amelie stands frozen, her face completely blank. Renee questions what the man means when he says that His Majesty is gone. The man explains how a guard on duty noticed the Emperor's chamber was unusually silent earlier, so he went inside to check and found the balcony door wide open with His Majesty nowhere in sight. He adds that everyone has now been summoned for an emergency meeting and that they must locate the Emperor at once. Amelie's father expresses confidence that His Majesty is safe and says he will ask if any of the servants happen to see him leave. The man thanks the Count for his cooperation before shouting for everyone to assemble inside. He appears far more anxious about the people who might encounter His Majesty than about the Emperor himself, which leaves Amelie standing speechless. She observes silently, noting that Serwin is a swordmaster and a skilled fighter, so she wonders why that man seems so alarmed for the Emperor's safety. Suddenly, a hand rises. A claims that she actually saw the Emperor earlier. The man quickly seizes her by the arm, demanding to know where and when she saw him and what His Majesty's condition appeared to be. He urgently asks if she noticed any signs of aggression, but the girl shakes her head and says no. She explains that she only saw the Emperor riding his horse toward the forest and knew nothing beyond that. She adds that the knights often use that same path, so she had not thought much of it at the time. The man immediately shouts for all the men to head into the forest and declares that they must find His Majesty at once. He commands them to maintain their distance and approach with utmost caution if they encounter him. The men respond in unison before rushing out of the house. Renee watches in confusion, wondering why everyone seems so panicked when the Emperor is clearly more than capable of protecting himself. After all, Serwin was kidnapped when he was only 6 yet managed to return after capturing his own kidnappers. Renee assumes that perhaps they are simply concerned because His Majesty has gone missing. Amelie, however, feels a chill run down her spine as she realizes the Emperor has entered the woods. If her premonition is correct, then both the Delahaim estate and Fidelia Forest are now in grave danger. Should the forest burn down along with all its resources, the villagers' livelihoods would be destroyed. Her family would struggle to rescue everyone, and their peaceful way of life would collapse entirely. She tells herself that she cannot allow this to happen, that there must be something she can do to prevent it with her magic. Her father notices her pale expression and asks if she is all right. Amelie feels a wave of guilt, believing that she is partially responsible for the current situation. It would not have taken Serwin so long to find her if she had not left the forest. Determined, she transforms back into her human form and clasps her father's hand, insisting that they must stop the Emperor. Her father, taken aback, asks what she means. Amelie explains that she saw Fidelia Forest engulfed in flames in her dream and believes it to be a prophetic vision. Her father realizes she must be referring to the witch's gift of foresight. She continues to describe how, within that dream, she also saw something concerning the Emperor. Her father nods gravely and states that he will begin evacuating all residents near the area and prepare for the possibility of a large-scale forest fire. He tells her the two sisters should stay here and take care, as Amelie says she is going to the forest and do what she can there. Her father calls this too dangerous as she tells him to not worry as she is a witch. She then dashes to her family's shock as they yell her name. She notes that there are 2 things she must do as she sits on her broom. The first is to stop the fire, and the second is to prevent the massacre as she rides through the air. She notes how she needs to do something about the flames and that Serwin is dangerous. Also that without the Fidelia Forest many people will starve. As long as she can find the fire, then she should be able to put it out easily with her magic. The sky was dark in her dream, so the forest might get engulfed in a few hours, meaning that the fire is likely starting to spread right now. She then spots it as a cloud of smoke is rising into the air. She flies quickly over as she notes how from the looks of it, it does not seem to be Serwin who caused it, and she wonders what happened. We see a bunch of nincompoops staring in shock as they yell about how they cannot put out the fire on their own. They panic and start to run, yelling about how they need to get more people to help. One of them yells that the closest town is miles away and that the forest will get incinerated by the time they get back. Someone yells it is hot as another asks if the other guy is saying they should wait and burn to death. One guy then yells saying they should go ask for that witch's help and that it would be easy for her to put out a fire like this. Another guy calls him an idiot saying the witch died years ago. He argues that there was another witch apart from the granny named Amelie or something. One guy says they cannot as he heard she is too dumb and cannot do anything. The man then seems stunned as he wonders what they are supposed to do now. Amelie then arrives asking what they are doing just standing there. She splashes water down as the men yell what was that and if it was water. One of them yells to look as the fire has been put out. Amelie then calls the 5 of them as she stands on her broom and they mention how it's that witch. She then acts like Smokey the Bear as she questions if they know they are not supposed to light fires in the forest and that cooking here is forbidden. They try to make an excuse, but she then points to the pot near them and tells them to save it. She notes it is obvious what had happened and that they were hanging out, and with the town being so far they tried to make something to eat. This is why they were panicking when the fire started to spread. They then all bow saying they are sorry and will never do it again and to have mercy on them. She lets out a breath as she asks if they realize that they all almost died today. She notes how bad it would have been had she not made it here in time. Especially since these guys would have gone to the witch's house for help without knowing that a murderer would be there waiting to kill them. She is sure that this is why there were so many bodies in front of the house and why the fire spread in her dream. She tells the 5 that if this ever happens again that one of them should go tell the town about the fire so that Delahame's lord can help them. They say yes and that they will make sure to do that. They then start to speak about how she is very different from the rumors. She asks what rumors as the other men whack him asking if he is stupid or something. They all yell thanks to her and that they live in peace thanks to her along with the other witches that protect this forest for generations. She is confused as they continue to cheer and call her a beautiful witch. She turns, saying to beware of fires and to head home already and to make sure to tell the night watchman to not enter the forest tonight either. They say yes and thank you as she says farewell. She covers her pouty face blushing as they yell they love her and to take care. She then notes to herself how still despite this she was glad she mustered up the courage to come here. If I learned anything from this, it's that only Amelie can prevent forest fires. Later we see the wind blow some leaves as she glances around noting how she has dealt with the fire and now has to find Serwin. She then looks off into the distance as she thinks about the house and how it should be around here somewhere. She gulps as she notes how she bets Serwin is in the yard as we get to see an image of him. She steps on the ground as she wishes she could see the house from above. She also notes how it would be hard for her to undo the spells Granny witch placed to ward people off in case a witch hunt happened. As she looks around she notes how the sun is going down and all, but it should not be this dark. Also, why is it so quiet here? She notes she is almost there as something causes her to flinch. She covers her mouth as she notes how it smells like something is rotting as her eyes then open wide. She notes how the house is now covered in what looks like smoke. She notes how it was not dark due to the sun being down but actually due to the smoke. She reaches her hand out as she wonders where the Emperor is. She looks around a tree as she notes how she does not have a choice right now as it would be bad if he discovered she is a witch. She then notices that there is something in the smoke. She wonders if that is a person as her body shudders. She stumbles back as she wonders why anyone would be here before bumping and tripping on something. She crashes back into the ground as she yells. She is then alarmed as some darkness seeps in the air. She looks and sees a dead deer on the floor. She notes how it's like the deer is getting eaten by the back smoke. She wonders if this could be the calamity that is beginning to spread. She then recalls how the calamity is a being that consumes everything and would eventually destroy the world. This must be it right here. She then wonders why the calamity has been released already and if the Emperor might already be dead. She then stands firm as she notes this is not possible due to how slowly the calamity is spreading. The novel has specifically mentioned that it would spread powerfully and rapidly. She notes that this must be a passing occurrence and maybe the seal on the calamity has weakened. She decides to first try and make the smoke go away as she did in the Emperor's chamber, and although he might find out she's a witch, that is not what's important right now. She raises her hand as a spell is getting casted. She calls for a great wind as the air around her now whirls. The winds then get more violent as it swirls around the forest. Amelie continues her spell and notes how difficult this is, but that she needs to push a little more. The air continues to swirl in the air as she notes how the house has finally come in view. She then says, "Oh no," as she notices all the carcasses there are here. She calls this horrible as she recalls seeing a person earlier and wonders who that was. She wonders if it was the Emperor as we now see a gooey person, which causes Amelie to gasp in shock. She wonders what that ghastly thing is as black goo continues to drip. The creature laughs as it says, "Look who we have here," and calls Amelie a young witch. Amelie notes how creepy this thing is and how its voice is like metal scraping together. She asks who it is and why it is here. The being grins as it says it is the calamity that will destroy the world. The creature then mentions how it is sure Amelie knows exactly who it is. Amelie covers her mouth as this is the calamity. She notes how the smoke is now crawling on the ground like goo. This causes her to wonder what to do, as if she touches it she will be dead like the animals, writhing in pain as she rots only to disappear without a trace. Calamity then points at her as it calls her young witch and mentions how she is full of fear. She then notices that this is Serwin's face, yet this is truthfully not him. Calamity tells her to not be afraid as her flesh and blood will soon be his. She asks what that's supposed to mean as she huffs and puffs. The smoke is starting to strangle her and she can't see anymore as she feels dizzy. She then yells no and that she needs to get a hold of herself as she must blow this smoke away. The calamity mentions how it appears as though Amelie has a trick up her sleeve, but that her tricks will mean nothing. Amelie thinks about how her magic is not working and what she should do. She wonders when the seal became so weak and also notes how she doesn't know how to turn the seal back to what it was. The wind continues to blow around her as she turns after hearing the sound of horses. She wonders what that sound is as the Emperor's men arrive on horses. She wonders if Ethan and the knights are here already as the men start to clamor. She notes how his men will likely think she is trying to hurt the Emperor, and also that if they found out she's a witch. Her heart drops as she envisions an execution and notes this would be the worst. Ethan then calls her miss and yells at her to not go any further as it is too dangerous. He tells her that he does not know how she got there, but that she should come towards them as they will protect her. Amelie seems to get confused as she notes how it seems like they don't see her as an enemy and are rather more wary of the Emperor instead. She wonders if this has happened to them before then. She then realizes this must mean they know how to fight this thing then, and notes how there should be a solution before spotting her sister. Her sister calls her name as Amelie wonders what her sister is even doing here. Calamity then smirks and points while noting how this is what Amelie cares about. It tells her to watch carefully as the smoke then starts to move towards Renee. Amelie yells for Renee to watch out as wind magic is casted. She shields Renee from the shadow with her wind. Someone yells what this is and wonders where the wind is coming from. Amelie notes how she cannot do much having sent her wind at Renee, so she should tell her sister to get back. Amelie runs over yelling Renee's name, asking if she is alright. Renee starts to say she is fine but then panics. She calls for her sister Amelie as the calamity is now right behind her. Amelie turns to see a hand covering her face. The hand reaches towards her to her shock before her chin is grabbed. The being mentions how he loves seeing how desperate she is and then tells her to try and do something as it clenches her face. Amelie struggles as she notes how she can only use one spell at a time. Renee yells telling Amelie to remove this wind so they can save her as someone tells Renee to not get closer. Amelie herself decides not to as she wants to keep Renee out of danger. The calamity then talks about the Emperor and how he has been waiting for her ardently for a very long time. He reaches his other hand out as Amelie says, "So what?" Calamity tells her that he cannot wait to see the expression on the Emperor's face when he wakes up realizing he has killed Amelie with his own bare hands. He can already imagine how divine the Emperor's despair will taste. Amelie is stunned and shudders at this comment. He squeezes her as she notes how he is too strong and she cannot fight him without magic. She then pulls back the wind as she hopes that Ethan will protect her sister. Ethan yells that the wind is subsiding as he yells for everyone to stop the smoke. He notes to himself how they all came to stop His Majesty, but it appears as though the witch is the one stopping him. He notes how had it not been for her they would be too late. He notes how the only thing they seem to be able to do now is protect Renee, who seems to be the witch's friend. He curses as he internally leaves His Majesty to Miss Witch. Calamity continues to hold Amelie as it asks if this is the best Amelie can do. He grabs her mouth as he says he has had enough of her petty tricks. He lifts her up as she notes how she cannot breathe. The calamity then grabs at its head to the shock of Amelie and Ethan. It is noted that the smoke is disappearing. Amelie wonders what this power is as she springs on the floor. She starts to dash over as she notes how the invincible calamity is reacting like this, so this power must be it. She then touches the face as flashes start to appear near the Emperor and his face slowly reverts back. She continues the spell as she yells internally for Serwin to come back. A large flash is then witnessed by all the knights as Serwin then blinks. Amelie then stops before Serwin then falls onto her shoulder with a thud. She notes how he is falling as he drags her to the ground. She sighs a breath of relief as she notes it's over now. Later at the castle we see hands being held as Amelie notes how she had to come here as he won't let go of her hand. They are both side by side near a bed as she notes how she ended up meeting the Emperor just like how it happened in the novel. She notes how she has been too complacent as the calamity is much more powerful and dangerous than she had thought. She notes how both her and Renee could have been seriously hurt then. She wonders if she should have done the logical thing of leaving her family father than getting excited about finally having a family. She lets go of his hand as she decides to get some fresh air. She wonders if she should just make a run for it now, but wonders what will happen to Renee and her father if she does. She notes how even if she did run, what would be the point in being the only survivor, especially since the calamity could destroy the world in a moment. She then gets leaned on as she yells Your Majesty while feeling very startled. She wonders what he is doing here and if he found out she was trying to get away. She squirms as she yells Your Majesty. She yells that she was not trying to run and only went to open the windows as it was hot. To this he just says finally, that he has finally found her. She tells her he has so he can let her go now. He is unmoved as she notes how he must be really out of it. Someone then comes in asking if he can help, which startles Amelie. Awkward silence then ensues as the knight sees the scene. He then slams the door, apologizing for interrupting as Amelie yells it is not what he thinks. She tells His Majesty to please let her go now as she is sure he will regret this later. She then turns in silence and tells him to not say she did not warn him. As she steps outside we hear a lot of murmur. Amelie continues to step before we see that he is latched onto her like a backpack. She has firmly decided to make him really regret this. She walks in front of everyone who talks as she notes how this is the emperor of the nation. Later we see Ethan, who is stunned. He says he would like to apologize on His Majesty's behalf before she tells him it is not his fault. Ethan asks if he is awake, to which Amelie says she thinks so. Ethan tells His Majesty that the knights have assembled and asks if they should prepare to return to the imperial palace. Silence ensues in the room as he again tells His Majesty that he has asked a question. Ethan then notes that His Majesty seems to not hear him at all and apologizes to Amelie as he does not know what to do. The Emperor, still in a daze, starts to open his eyes as Amelie cannot believe he is behaving like this and notes how he never lost his dignity as a ruler before. Bro is so clingy, lol. Amelie notes how everyone has found out she is a witch and that numerous people saw this when she had fought the Emperor, including the Imperial Guards. They now even know that Renee is her family and that she has ended up getting her family entangled in this. She wonders what will happen to her now and if she will die like Amelie in the novel. We later see Ethan bow as he tells her thank you for stopping the Emperor. She tells him she only did what anyone else would in that situation as she notes how she never imagined him thanking her. Her heart then beats loud as she notes how things might actually work out. Renee then comes into the room asking how Amelie is feeling. She tells Renee she is fine as Renee can clearly see despite the Emperor being glued to her back. Something snaps inside of Renee as she shouts asking what the Emperor is doing to her sister. She waves her sword as she asks how dare he put her hands around her sister and to take them off at once. Ethan pleads with her saying His Majesty is not doing this on purpose as Renee yells for him to move. He yells to calm down as His Majesty seems to be in a daze still. He is silent as all the scenes play out around him before he suddenly jolts awake. He then springs up like he's 2 hours late for work to everyone's shock. Ethan yells asking if His Majesty is awake, to which he stands silent. Serwin then says to get ready to return to the palace solemnly. Ethan yells yes as Renee hugs Amelie, protecting her while Amelie notes how Serwin is acting like nothing happened. He then turns and mentions Amelie. He smiles as he tells her they both have something to discuss. She notes how emotionless his smile is as the sisters stare nervously. He tells her he would like to start by apologizing. She says pardon as he mentions how she has scratches on her cheek. She feels them for the first time as she notes this was from when he grabbed her face in the forest. She tells him it was not he who did it as it was the calamity, to which he says it was still his body. He tells her he would also like to apologize for the disgraceful conduct earlier as Amelie is embarrassed and accepts his apology. She then rustles her hair back, which causes the Emperor to flinch. He notes how this scent is overwhelming as she calls for His Majesty. He touches the wall as he tells her that she does not seem to be aware of her nice scent. She starts to sniff herself as she wonders if this is why he collapsed on top of her. He then sits back down saying he cannot believe the witch he was searching for is before him right now. She tells him she is sorry for deceiving him and mentions how she was not sure why His Majesty was seeking her out and did not want to be caught. He tells her that despite this she came looking for him in the forest and that she was very reckless, almost getting herself killed. She tells him she was not sure what the calamity was capable of as it was like an evil spirit. She asks if he was looking for her to destroy it. He then says he will correct her and mentions that she did not destroy it as it still exists within him. He tells her that her powers just calmed it down as it seems to be unconscious. She wonders how her powers can do such a thing before realizing she does not have a clue. She also doesn't know why he came looking for her specifically as well. He tells her he was told by the person who sealed the calamity in him to find a witch in the Fidelia forest 20 years later. Amelie asks if that is it and if he really came here just due to that. He tells her he had no choice and mentions how they will talk on the way back as the Imperial Palace is far. She tells him to wait as she has not agreed to that yet and to not decide things on his own. He tells her she decided to not run no and that he had assumed she already made her mind. He notes how she seems to really care for her family. Despite not looking alike, she seems quite close to them. Amelie grits her teeth to this as she notes how it's like he's reading her mind and wonders how he knew her father was the Count. She clenches her clothes as she says fine and will help him defeat the calamity but for a price. She points and says to promise a fair reward with guarantees of status and safety. She will not go if he does not agree. He agrees as she then extends her hand and mentions how they seem to be on the same boat. She tells him she will help him if he protects her. He is silent before he then says he promises. Later in the night, Amelie made a difficult decision of telling Renee about the calamity and other events in the novel under the guise of having foreseen it in a dream. Renee yells about how Amelie is going with the Emperor. She says no and mentions how dangerous it is and different it is from here. Amelie says the Emperor promised to protect her and that things will not go like they did in her premonition. She tells Renee she is going there to prevent it as Renee says she wants to come and protect Amelie as well and will not let Amelie go by herself. Amelie tells Renee she can't as she internally notes how many people in the Imperial Palace are prejudiced against witches, so she cannot let them know she is related to Delahaim House. Renee asks if Amelie will see father, to which Amelie says sorry and that she does not think she can go if she sees him. She notes how he probably won't let her go if he knows anyways before Renee hugs Amelie. She tells Amelie to leave father to her and to just take care of herself. Amelie thanks Renee as the carriage rattles off. Renee internally notes how Amelie puts herself in harm's way to protect Renee so Amelie can have it her way this time. This does not mean, however, that Renee will let Amelie shoulder the burden on her own. She tells her little sister to wait as she will be right behind her. Birds tweet as the sun rises and a man yells to stop. He says they will rest for a while as Amelie notes how sitting for hours on end is tiring. She wonders when they will eat and who she should ask as the only people she knows are Serwin and Ethan. She then turns her eyes as she stares at Serwin's scary sight and wonders why he is staring and if she did something wrong. She wonders if he has something to say to her, but he turns and leaves. She notes how he was much nicer when she was a bird and wonders why she treats humans and animals so differently. Someone then yells to Sir Rowan that it is not catching fire as Rowan says there is not enough airflow. Amelie listens and wondering if they are cooking something. She sees them bicker as she notes how they seem to have trouble with lighting a fire, which is something she can do with a flick of a finger. She notes how if they can't cook they might have to settle with having only water. She walks over saying excuse. She mentions how they seem to have trouble with fire and asks if she can take a look. He asks if she wants to help them and one of them says by all means. Rowan starts to say they should handle it on their own before Amelie then starts a strong blaze like Zuko. She yells that it was too strong before asking if this will suffice. The chef's eyes beam as he asks if she can control fire. She tells him yes and she just boosted the flames, but the wind made it stronger so she brought it down. He tells her it's perfect and that with fire like this he can make anything and how he's always had trouble with getting the right temperature. She tells him she is glad to help as Rowan stares quietly. Later the wind blows as Amelie grabs her belly and says she is so full. She recalls being offered a lot as she notes how she may have eaten too much but that it was good. Someone tells her to stop right there as Rowan says listen witch. He tells her to not start getting any ideas as she looks over. She seems shocked and confused at this pea-brain. Chapter Amelie flinches at this comment as the man starts to run his mouth again. He mentions how just because His Majesty and the knights like her that does not mean everyone feels the same way. He mentions how if it were him he would have gotten rid of someone as dangerous as her. He mentions how she should be grateful as he cannot disobey His Majesty's order and tells her to not pull any funny business. As he stomps away, Amelie wonders what was with that guy. She notes how even Serwin has not mentioned a thing about her using magic and wonders if that guy is saying she should not have helped. She also notes how on top of that he threatened her as well. Later we see someone ask Miss Witch what she is doing here. It is Sir Chad who seems surprised she knows who he is. She mentions how they met several times in His Majesty's room as he calls it embarrassing that he forgot. She notes to herself how it seems as though his wound from that night is yet to heal. Chad tells her he brought her things as she notices her luggage. She notes how the blue one is not hers as Chad said Lady Renee sent it to Amelie. Amelie says she sees as she thinks of her sister. Chad then says he'll put them in her luggage as she tells him that is fine as he has hurt his head. He tells her it is alright and that if she had appeared any later then he would have lost it anyways. Either way he's glad he got to keep it, which makes Amelie dumbfounded at why he's laughing. He tells her he is kidding and that he holds no ill will to witches. He mentions how when he was young he used to have a friend who was a witch in his village. He mentions telling people in the capital about it, which made many angry at him and refused to listen. This made him sad as Amelie asks if people in the capital are still hostile to witches. She asks if witch hunts still happen, to which Chad says no, since His Majesty banned them. He says people will not prosecute her for this and the worst thing that they can do is talk behind her back and do petty things. Amelie mentions how Sir Rowan has been watching and threatening her as Chad asks about it. He then apologizes on Rowan's behalf as he tells her a knight should not be driven by personal feelings and mentions how Rowan is young with lots to learn. He tells Amelie to be rest assured as there is nothing to worry about. He says that many, including himself, know why she is here and are thankful for that. He says that if Rowan keeps bothering her then he will let Captain Ethan know. He then also mentions that if Rowan is rude ever again she can feel free to let him have it as Amelie asks if that is really true. He tells her of course. He tells her he will leave now as he has a lot of other stuff to move as Amelie says wait. She tells him to take this potion as appreciation. One is to apply to the head and the other is to drink. He thanks her as he mentions how he was worried if he'd make it to the capital with this wound. She notes how His Majesty seems hard on his men as Chad says it's because His Majesty cannot afford to leave the palace for too long. Chad says the potion is amazing and the best he's ever used. He recalls the one his childhood friend made was painful as Amelie says it was made by someone very skilled. Internally she thanks Granny Witch. She asks Chad if his friend is still in the village, to which Chad says she went into hiding and that he's sure she's living far away now. Amelie says she sees as steps can be seen. Ethan asks if the horse has enough water yet and tells his men to be fully prepared. He notes everything looks in order as he then thinks there's still the Rowan issue. He notes this will be a pain to deal with, but it'd be bad if Lady Amelie comes to hate them due to Rowan. Ethan notes how it would be nice if His Majesty comforted Amelie rather than loiter around her. He mentions how this is exactly why he once suggested His Majesty go get some dating experience. Chad asks the captain if anything else is needed, to which Ethan says no, especially with Chad's head injury and all. Chad asks what head injury, which leaves Ethan puzzled. All the men talk about how the bandages are off with no wound and ask if a wizard helped him or something. They all touch his head, talking about how it healed as he mentions it was Amelie's potion. He says it did not leave a scar as the others call this amazing and want a favor as well. The dirtbag, who is yet to know his place, walks in asking if they are sure there are no side effects. He asks if Chad is sure he fully healed as he says he saw smoke and foam come out of it earlier. He asks if they are being too careless with an outsider and questions how such a potion could exist. Someone's hand then appears with red lines around it. The idiot's neck is grabbed and then yanked to the ground like a dog. Serwin asks who asked for his opinion while holding his chin. The idiot says that if His Majesty wishes to punish him he will gladly oblige as his loyalty remains. Serwin smirks as he calls this dog unloyal. Serwin tells this waste of oxygen that he already made it clear Amelie was dear to him and to treat her with respect. He squeezes the dirty face as the idiot yells for forgiveness. A thud occurs as someone calls for His Majesty. Ethan says it is his duty to keep the knights in check and that he should be blamed for this and to have mercy. He mentions he will not let Rowan make the same mistake and that if Rowan disappears then Amelie will be alarmed. Serwin is silent as he then says he will overlook this once. He walks off as Rowan thanks them. Ethan asks if he really doubts His Majesty's decision and that he told him already that a guard must follow orders with no question. The other knights call this moron trouble as Ethan wonders if the Emperor is going to see Amelie. His Majesty then halts midway as Ethan notes probably not then. His Majesty then inhales as Ethan then asks for him to go see her. He mentions that she is likely distraught so His Majesty can take this time to bond with her. His Majesty says he does not want to bond with her, which causes Ethan to question this. He asks if Ethan can smell this as Ethan asks what he is referring to. He tells Ethan it is like someone wrapping him in a soft blanket and lighting a fireplace. A comforting and warm scent. Ethan asks if this is a good thing, to which His Majesty says it makes his head numb and feel weak. It makes him drowsy and not able to think straight. Ethan notes how despite this His Majesty does not seem to want to distance himself from her and tells him to approach her first. He tells His Majesty to think of her as a pet bird if he feels uncomfortable due to her being human now. He mentions how His Majesty treasured her plenty then. His Majesty is silent as the wind blows by. He thinks deeply about the idea of thinking of her as a bird. Bro is probably thinking about getting a good sniff again or something. Or maybe chucking her out the window like Putin's enemies. Steps can be heard in the dark forest as we see Amelie glancing around. She notes how they will be arriving at the palace soon and how she might want to practice her magic beforehand. She did not want to do this during the day as people would stare and decided to do it in this secluded area. She decided to try and morph into an eagle or deer this time. Or at least some other majestic land animal. She does not want to turn into a tiny bird again and wants this transformation to be majestic. The results are the same however. She flaps her wings in frustration saying not this form again. She notes how she should have been able to change into anything she wanted and not this fluff ball again. She decides to not give up and just practice before something grabs her feet. She is then pulled as she gives out one loud bird tweet. She then lands down on top of a hand. It is the Emperor who mentions how he told her not to run as she turns and wonders why he keeps doing that. He continues to ask if she forgot their promise and reminds her that she was the one who said they're on the same boat. She wonders what he just said while stunned as she then transforms right in front of him. She stands in front asking who said she was running and shouts about how she did not transform into a bird to run. She tells him she was just practicing magic and needed a quiet place to do so without getting gawked at. His Majesty notes how she behaves just like a bird as she asks how he could treat her like this and if he's listening. He recalls back to when Ethan said to think of her as a bird and how he did not understand it at first. He then reaches his hand out and touches her face as he tells Amelie he'd like to apologize for the misunderstanding and asks if she said she was going to help. She says she did as he gives her a smile. Amelie gulps as she wonders why he's smiling all of a sudden, and despite being a tyrant he's pretty good looking with a killer smile. He then leans over to her ear and then starts to ask her to help him fall asleep. This causes her to get confused as he then falls over on top of her. They both lay on the ground with Amelie shocked as she wonders what is wrong with him and if he's going to sleep like this. The knights rush in at the right time once again as they mention hearing a loud sound. They wonder if something happened to His Majesty as Amelie says oh no. All of them including Ethan then stop. One asks if they are interrupting something while Amelie yells for help. She tells them to not just stand there and help as Serwin is crushing her. Later in the morning chirps can be heard as Amelie then jolts awake. She lays with her heart beating heavy beside His Majesty in confusion. She notes how she only meant to stay for a second but he would not let go of her and ended up falling asleep as well. She then glances over as she notes he is sound asleep. She feels bad for him as she notes how he's likely afraid the calamity could take over his body any second and how he likely could not sleep properly for 20 years. Ethan even noted he's never seen His Majesty sleep this well before. Amelie is silent as she takes a breath and wonders what it's like to live that long with such a heavy burden. She strokes his hair as she tells the calamity to not come out. She then flinches as a silent Serwin then seems to wake up. She is embarrassed as she says good morning. He rolls over as she tells him it is time to wake up or they will miss breakfast. He asks her if breakfast is more important to her than him. To this she straight up says yes it is. He remains silent on that one. He then sits up saying fine and notes how it would be cruel if he let her go hungry anyways. She notes how he was so mean and sensitive yesterday and wonders how someone could change so much in one day. She wonders what happened to this guy. It was at this point that Amelie did not know that Serwin is now changing his impression of her and thinking of her as a bird. A few hours later we see that the rain comes pouring down as people pass through the second teleportation portal. The horses continue to gallop as someone says damn it and notes what terrible weather this is. They wonder why everyone is not worn out yet and note how they are all riding quickly as well. It's the condom ad again who wonders if it's due to the magic tea Amelie served this morning that helps with stamina. He notes how he feels the cold because of the rain and his strength fading as he wonders if he should fall back. He grits his teeth as he says cannot do that due to everyone knowing he did not drink the tea and also he does not want people to see him look weak since he refused it. He notes this will only make the witch more cocky as well. He then feels a jerk in his body as he notes his leg is convulsing. He's about to fall and wonders what to do as he will crash into everyone riding behind him at this rate. He yells damn it all internally and wonders why he was so stubborn. Someone then yells for Sir Rowan to open his eyes as he does so in shock. It is Ethan who tells him he may fall behind if he's tired otherwise he'll slip. Rowan wonders what just happened as he swears he was just about to fall. He then notices that his horse is floating in the air and wonders if this is it. Before glancing over to see Amelie who is looking outside her carriage. She looks away hoping he won't get mad at her using magic as he wonders if the witch saved him. He sits in the rain silent before noting how this was someone His Majesty was desperately looking for. Despite that she is still a witch and that when he was younger, he had seen what the witches did when they fought back against the witch hunt. The knights were the ones fighting them, but innocent civilians died as well. Many had lost their family and possessions. He and his sister in particular lost their family and their homes. He notes how he cannot believe that a witch like her rescued him. He continues to watch silently as he says, "Damn it. The castle is now in view as we have arrived. We can now see the top view of an extravagant palace." A clip-clop sound can then be heard from one building in specific. The rustle of the leaves and the sound of a breeze passing by can be heard as we then see Amelie in a pretty white outfit saying wow and wondering what is this place. She looks in front of her to see an army of maids as it is mentioned that she will be staying here from now on. Serwin tells her he has prepared this palace for her and asks if it is to her liking. She tells him of course she likes it as the head maid named Madame Menard is then introduced to her. The head maid greets Amelie as Serwin points to her. The madam tells Amelie that these will be all the maids that are serving her. She tells Amelie about Charlotte and Milena, who both then bow to our female lead. Amelie seems to recognize the name Madame Menard as she then recalls how in the novel, this was the head maid who would torment the original Amelie. This head maid would later on get imprisoned in the dungeon after Renee takes over the palace, and Charlotte would get punished as well as she was the head maid's accomplice. This causes our current main character to wonder if these two will torment her now then. She takes a large gulp as she tells herself she is not the same Amelie and that things may still turn out differently. Serwin seems to see her nervousness before he then speaks up and says that this girl is his guest and that she must be treated with the utmost and tender care. Serwin then tells Amelie that he will need to head for the main palace and asks if Amelie will be alright by herself for now. Amelie tells him she is not a child and that of course she will be fine. This seems to surprise all the maids who wonder why the emperor is now being so kind. Serwin tells Amelie he knows she isn't, while Amelie then starts to think that Serwin must just be anxious about being alone right now. She then speaks up telling him that she will not be going anywhere and that he can come to see her right away if he feels unwell or something. She asks if that is okay, to which Serwin is silent for a moment before telling her alright. He is then seen riding off on his horse with Ethan. This prompts our female lead to note how this palace must be very big then if these two are traveling around by horse. Madame Menard then asks Amelie if they should go inside now and that the maids will give her a tour of the place. Amelie nervously laughs as she says yes and thank you while internally hoping that these people do not harass her. Later inside what appears to be the throne room, we see a lot of chatter amongst the people as they mention how the emperor has never left the imperial palace for this long. One guy talks about how the pro-nobility acted in the emperor's absence as another man wonders what business Serwin could have been attending to. The two guys are then startled as the arrival of His Majesty is announced. We then see Serwin in some royal drip as Ethan walks right behind His Majesty. As they step through the place we see more soldiers following from behind. Serwin steps up the stairs walking towards his throne. He is then seated as he tells all the people they may raise their heads now. It is noted that the empire's political stage involved 4 different types of nobles. It is noted that there are those that are two-faced and deceitful such as Count Minvers and Lewin, some villainous ones who prefer to hide in the shadows. The young bureaucrats such as Baron Avery and Duke Aderos. Side note, but this guy don't look young at all bruh. And finally the royal subjects who have been serving the empire for many years. If you took only one look things would seem all well. The truth was that this political peace was only forcefully established after many continued years of a reign of terror. Without regular warning there are aristocrats that are prone to coveting the seat of the throne. As Serwin sits he talks about how he thought he had grown sick of seeing everyone's faces but that he actually right now feels pleased to see all of them after all that time. He asks if that is correct to Count Eldona, who nervously says yes and calls it a great honor to see His Majesty again. The Emperor then laughs as he notes how the Count seems to not share his same sentiment, which causes the Count to nervously try to deny that. Serwin then gives him a menacing gaze as he mentions how he knows many of them are not happy to hear of his return. Serwin then specifically says those who are participating in illegal activity like gambling, embezzlement, and taking bribes. Serwin then mentions how he almost forgot about the fact that the Count assaulted his own family members among other things. Count Eldona calls to His Majesty, but Serwin coldly then tells his men to throw them all in the dungeon. Chad and the other guys say yes Your Majesty as they then start to round up all the crooks. The Count tries to protest saying that there must have been a misunderstanding and pleads for mercy. Serwin then stands up questioning the word mercy while pulling out a sword. The Count continues to beg for forgiveness as Serwin continues to walk over. Serwin then gives off a menacing stare as he wonders whose blood he should spill to set an example. He then looks down as he seems to notice something. He stares at his sword as he notes how he'll be stained by blood if he does this. He then starts to note how he's sure Amelie is already anxious about having to stay in a place far from home, and that if he comes back to her reeking of blood, then she'll be even more scared. He thinks of her getting scared and flinching as he notes how he would not want that to happen. As he stands on the carpet, he tells his men to take the man away as they say, "Yes, Your Majesty." He then tells his people to not forget that he has eyes and ears all over the palace, and that any attempt to conceal things from him is useless. Serwin hands the sword back to Ethan as someone then says the word "indeed," which catches His Majesty's attention. A man in the shadows tells His Majesty that they are all very aware of his incredible capabilities. Serwin notes to himself that this is Marquis Lewin. Serwin's heart beats angrily as he notes to himself how the amount of poison this guy has slipped into his food over the years could fill a whole barrel of wine. Serwin clenches his fist as he notes how all the attempts this guy has made to weaken his power makes his blood boil. Serwin thinks about how he should deal with this guy right now before stopping this train of thought. He then lets his fist go as he stands in silence. Serwin then turns as he says not today, and that a warning is enough for now. As he moves, he can hear someone start to laugh. They ask His Majesty if he is sure about that. They ask how Serwin could turn away from someone who seeks to end his life. They call the Emperor naive and continue to laugh. Serwin is silent as he notes how he does not care if he is hallucinating or hearing things. He tells the calamity that it may laugh at him all at once, but that he will never let it take control of him ever again. We then see Amelie, who sits in a chair and gazes out of the window. She then turns as something has caught her attention. Serwin's eyes gaze as he notes how as long as he has her, then he'll be able to hold on. He states that he just wishes for this to all end soon. Later we see Amelie patting her hair dry as she mentions how refreshing that was. She sighs as she notes how this was really nice, as she was not able to bathe properly on the way here as she was surrounded by men. She then hears someone shout at another person to explain themselves. We see Amelie stare on as Madame Menard seems to be chewing out some maids. A maid says that there must have been a leak in the ceiling above the dressing room, and the other talks about preparing clothes for Amelie this morning, but now it is all wet. Amelie is stunned as she notes how this means she won't have any clothes to wear. One maid mentions how they asked around and that a pool of water gathers at that spot every morning. Madame Menard then yells, asking what kind of excuse this is, and says the two ought to be taught a lesson for being careless. Amelie then jumps in saying that it is all right. She tells the madam that she brought her own dresses and can wear them. Amelie then wonders if this really is a coincidence, as only her dresses were the ones to get wet, but that she does not have proof that it was on purpose. Amelie is gloomy as the madam then tells the girls to get Amelie's luggage. The madam says that she is glad Amelie brought her own clothes, as Amelie nervously says yes. Another maid then tells Amelie to ask His Majesty to make her new dresses, and that this is the perfect chance for His Majesty to give her a gift. Amelie wonders why she would do that and notes that the maids do seem kind of concerned at least. She then thinks about how it's almost like they are pressuring her. A maid then says she will get Amelie a blanket and apologizes for the trouble as Amelie says thanks. The other two maids are silent as a yellow blanket is given to Amelie. We then see them have smirks on their faces, as we now know they are certified female dogs. Amelie's luggage is then placed on the floor with a thud as two maids then tell her that they did not know which suitcase had her clothes, so they brought both. Amelie apologizes to them for not letting them know and that they are in the blue one. The madam, being nosy, has already opened it and holds up a dress, mentioning how they are classic pieces with good fabric. She also mentions how they are a bit light for the weather but will be fine indoors. A maid then asks what they should do with Amelie's luggage and if they may unpack it all. Amelie seems to be alarmed by this, as she then tells them to unpack the blue suitcase and to leave the brown one for her to do on her own. She internally notes how her magic tools are in the brown one and cannot have these people looking inside it. A maid then tells Amelie to just leave it to them, and this is their job after all. This further worries Amelie, who hastily yells no and tells them to not do it. The maids seem to be weirded out by this request. They then kneel to the floor and ask for Amelie to forgive them. They ask if she is not letting them do it since they ruined her dresses, and tell her it will never happen again and to forgive them. Amelie tells them it is not like that and that there are just some things that are embarrassing in the case that she does not want to show. She internally notes how they are begging her to forgive them over something like that, and then wonders if they fear Serwin or something. She then notes how she can kind of see why they would be, as she recalls how Serwin treated his hard-working knights. She notes how he can be quite frightening and that her first impression of him was not really that great either. Amelie thinks about how she'd feel bad even getting close to that suitcase now with the maids around, and decides to leave it to the side for now. It is locked by magic anyways, so no one can see the inside, but she does wonder when she'll be able to unpack it though. Later we see her walking outside as she calls to His Majesty. He drops from atop his horse in silence and stares as Amelie then welcomes him back. She notes how he seems to have not changed at all today and that he must have been very busy. She then gets alarmed by something and flinches. She looks at him as she wonders why he looks so down and gloomy and if something had happened. As he steps over, he asks her why she is dressed so lightly and if this is the dress she brought from Delahaim. Amelie tells him yes and that Renee packed it for her. He then mentions how this would be fine to wear in Delahaim where it's warm all year, but that the weather in the capital is quite unpredictable. He then glares behind Amelie as he then asks weren't the maids supposed to prepare dresses for her. Amelie tries to be nice and tells him that she wanted to wear this as Renee picked it for her. She also says that she'll just wear a shawl if it gets cold and that she used to live in a forest so she's used to cold weather. Serwin then leans over to her as he tells her to let him know if she needs anything or if something happened. He won't know unless she tells him. His eyes then twitch as he then asks if she is wearing perfumed oil, to which Amelie says yes and that the maids put it on her. Bro then tells her not to use it anymore as it obscures her body's natural scent. She blushes as she notes how his choice of word is quite strange and this can be easily misunderstood by the maids. Her eyes then flash as she has the idea to use this to her advantage. She then grabs his hand before telling His Majesty that they should go into her room, just the two of them. Serwin seems confused by this but agrees to it nonetheless. Later we see the door open with a click. As she opens the door, the Emperor then wonders what all this is. Amelie wonders what is going on as her room has been turned into what looks like a honeymoon suite. Her room flashes as she notes how the maids seem to have misunderstood her relationship with Serwin and have taken things too far. She notes how she only really sleeps in the same room with him for purely medical purposes only. She then notes how this actually is far too much of a hassle to explain to people as it would eventually lead to her having to say that she is a witch. She then decides that it might be better for the people to think she is his lover or something then. She also decides that the state of the room really is not important as she can make use of this time. She runs over mentioning how she can finally open her suitcase as Serwin asks if she got rid of the maids purely to look inside that thing. She tells him yes and that she did not have a choice as they won't leave her alone unless she's with His Majesty. She mentions how she told them earlier she did not want them to unpack her luggage, but they got on their knees and begged for forgiveness as they could not serve her properly. She sighs as she asks him if it really is that hard to have some alone time in the palace. As she rummages through her things, Serwin turns and tells her that's just the way things are here. Amelie then asks when they'll be able to find something to destroy the calamity. She asks if she can tell the maid she is an oddball and needs time alone or if he could say it. Serwin then asks if she wants to find a way to destroy the calamity. She tells him yes and that have to, and he responds by asking how. She tells him that she'll first look around the palace to see traces of the seal and that if there are she'll try to see how it got broken. She then says that if they cannot destroy the calamity then they will at least need to reseal it. Serwin asks if she really thinks he has not tried to do that for the past 20 years, to which Amelie says she is a witch and that she might be able to see it all from a different perspective. Serwin then warns Amelie that this palace is a dangerous place and that if the nobility knew that she was close to him, they'd make her a target and try to harm her. He tells her that if she wanders around for clues then she might be putting herself in danger and that he'd rather her be by his side to protect him than her getting herself in harm's way. She tells him she knows it's risky, to which he tells her she truly does not. Serwin mentions how fighting the calamity alone was so overwhelming that he was not able to drive out the nefarious factions that snaked their way into the court. He mentions how all he could do was act like a fearsome tyrant since he would have no excuse if people called him an incompetent ruler. Amelie notes how he called himself incompetent despite how he was able to accomplish so much with the calamity sealed within him. He tells her that he is personally looking for a way to destroy the calamity and would like her to focus on what he needs her to do, which is staying by his side and protecting him. He tells her she may spend the rest of her time doing what she wishes before pleading with her. She is silent to this before softly saying okay. He then tells her they should both go to bed now then. He says that he hopes she has not forgotten about him yet as she's been so focused on the calamity. Amelie then seems to be super confused by what he means. Her head then explodes as she recalls how she must sleep in the same bed as Serwin every day from now on. He tells Amelie to come and taps on the bed as he tells her he needs her with him here. She wonders how he could say this so nonchalantly and wonders if she's the only one nervous right now. She then decides that this is an act of medical necessity as she goes towards him. She notes how she is perfectly fine and that she just needs to close her eyes quickly and then go to sleep. As she puts her hand on the bed, he grabs her wrist. He pins it to the bed as she then plops onto the bed. She blushes as she wonders what he is doing and how he is so close. She also wonders why he has to be so good looking as well. Serwin then leans over very close as she gets very alarmed. She then gives him a slight shove as she tells His Majesty that he is far too close. She nudges him over to the side, saying he should be fine right here and to please maintain his distance. She then flops back onto her side of the bed as she tells him good night. Silence would ensue as Amelie lays and Serwin sits upright in bed. He then asks her if she is still awake. Silence would continue from this before we see him lay into bed as well, and he plays with the ribbon in her hair. He then brings it closer and gives the ribbon a kiss and tells Amelie to have a good night. The room becomes filled with the sun's rays and the birds chirp as morning seems to have arrived. Amelie's eyes open as a hand is fiddling with her bangs. Serwin asks her if she is awake and moves his hand away while Amelie seems stunned. She then wonders when she fell asleep. She then notes how he really is so handsome and that if she did not know any better she'd have been a fan of his. Serwin tells her that it is still early and that she may continue to sleep. He mentions how Madame Menard will be here to take care of her and that she does not need to worry about anything. Amelie then tells His Majesty that he is the one who does not need to worry, as if the calamity ever acts up, he can call her right away. She stretches her hand out as she notes she should hold his hand as a preventative measure. He seems shook by this before he holds her hand up and then says that he will. A clack can then be heard as he leaves the room. Amelie then falls back into bed as she notes how with him gone, it is time for her to get some more sleep. She is silent but gets the sensation of a tingle and a prickle. It is all the pressure she feels from the maids who have entered the room and stare at her sleep. Amelie wonders what the madam is doing and wonders if this is what Serwin meant when he said the madam would take care of her. Amelie then turns and tells the madam that she does not need to stand there and should go get some rest. The madam tells Amelie to not worry as this is their duty and that they will be right here so they know exactly when Amelie wakes up. Silence would then ensue as Amelie then springs up from bed due to all the pressure. The madam then says that Amelie is awake now and tells a maid to go bring in breakfast. Amelie is in a pretty red outfit as she notes how something is weird. She wonders what they brought in so much food and if Serwin really expects her to do a lot of work today. She turns as she notes how the maids do seem really happy though. The maids talk of how they'd never seen such fabric before and how His Majesty ordered this and the necklace himself while marveling at the quality. Amelie then closes her eyes as she notes how this is all too much. The maids talk of how they can make a bunch of new dresses for Amelie with all this fabric. They then talk of how this fabric is the same one used for the fabric of Count Minver's daughter. The mention of this causes Amelie to halt her fork as she thinks of the name Count Minver. She recalls that this is the name of the father of Lenia, a girl who tried to seduce Serwin to become the emperor. Lenia would use Madame Menard and Charlotte to isolate Amelie in the original story and ultimately become the empress. This girl would however die during the uprising though. Also, having seen no hope on staying on Serwin's Cid, Count Minvers would abandon his daughter to join the rebel forces. This guy is a typical backstabbing character and Amelie wonders if he will play a similar role this time around as well. The maids chatter at how this is incredible that the House of Minvers used such exquisite fabric for a dress that would only be worn once. Another maid mentions how no matter how wealthy the Minvers are, they are no match for the imperial family though. A maid then says of course and that the dress being made for Amelie is proof of His Majesty's love and that no one could compete with that. Amelie, who was sipping on a drink, is startled by this statement as she internally notes how it is not like that. The maids then giggle amongst themselves as Amelie thinks about how she and Serwin are not even close to being lovers. She is sure he will soon stop sending her gifts and internally tells these girls to not get ahead of themselves. The next day though we see Lady Amelie receive more gifts from His Majesty in the form of gift boxes. The day after that we see the maids announce more gifts and mention how His Majesty must really care for her. Amelie internally says stop, but the next day we see Amelie holding her head in frustration. The maids talk about opening the gifts and the expensive chicken he ordered for her. They talk about the luminous jewels and the rare fruits that you can't even get during this season. She internally says enough with a comedic face. Later we see her lay face down on her bed all gloomy as she notes how tired she is. She wishes to be alone as she notes how someone has again followed her into her room and pleads to just be left alone. Amelie notes how she's sure this girl will say something along the lines of is something wrong or if Amelie needs something. To Amelie's shock though, the girl asks if Amelie wishes to be alone. Amelie jolts up from the bed as she says yes and that she'd like that very much since it's too much for her to be with people days on end. She tells the maid that they do not need to wait on her all the time and that she will be just fine. The maid then tells Amelie that it actually would be a problem if His Majesty was to find out. Amelie says excuse me and asks what she means by that. She asks if he told them to spy on her or something. The maid then says that he told them to keep an eye on her at all times so that she does not leave the palace. Amelie asks really before noting how this is why everyone would always look tense and jittery when she walked near the front door. Amelie then wonders why this girl is telling her this and how this girl likely should be keeping it a secret. The two then stare at one another in silence as the maid then mentions how Amelie likely still thinks she is suspicious. Amelie nervously tells the maid that she honestly still does. The maid then bows saying she will introduce herself. She is Milena Belfar and Sir Rowan's little sister. Amelie is alarmed as she mentions how Sir Rowan's last name wasn't Rowan and how it appears to be his first name. Milena tells Amelie that it does not matter whose family the Emperor's personal guard belongs to, so that is why all his knights are referred to by first name. Amelie then asks why she is saying she is Sir Rowan's sister since Sir Rowan personally does not like Amelie. Milena then sighs as she mentions how she knew that would be the case and that this is why she told Amelie. Milena then bows saying she'd first like to thank Amelie for saving her brother and that Rowan also sends his gratitude to Amelie. She mentions how her brother also would like to apologize for being rude to Amelie. Milena then says that she was told by Captain Ethan that Amelie was a witch. This then stuns Amelie as she internally says what? It is mentioned that when Amelie first arrived, Ethan summoned Milena in secret to talk about this. Ethan mentioned that Amelie was from a faraway land and asked Milena to take good care of Amelie. Her brother also confessed about what had happened on the way to the palace. Milena mentions how her brother and herself lost their parents during the witch hunt several years ago and that many people had died during that period. Despite people knowing it was not the witch's fault, those that went through those tragedies still feared and hated the witches. Her brother is one of those people, so this is why he was hostile to Amelie. Milena says that Rowan regrets it but that the way he treated Amelie was clearly wrong. Milena mentions how her brother sacrificed so much for her and that after hearing the story she wanted to help him. She decided that she herself would be the one to repay Amelie for the kindness she showed. Amelie tells her she understands but that Milena really does not have to. Milena says no and that this is the only way for her brother to serve as a knight with a clear conscience. Milena then tells her that she is also actually very worried to leave Amelie by herself. She mentions how if anything happened to her then Milena and her brother will be guilt-ridden for the rest of their lives. Amelie seems to be taken aback by this as her face turns blue. Milena then grabs and starts to run with Amelie. She tells Amelie that she is far too gullible to believe she is Rowan's sister and that they need to go check the family registry for her to certain. Milena says she will bring Amelie there as Amelie tries to say it is okay and that she believes Milena. Milena tells her that she shouldn't. She then says that Amelie should not worry as Milena is here to fully support Amelie. Amelie is flustered as she claps and thinks to herself how Milena is so straightforward that she must really be Rowan's little sister. A moment later would pass. Amelie asks if Milena is really saying that the servants are always near Amelie since the Emperor asked them to keep an eye on Amelie. Milena mentions how Amelie does not seem surprised by all this, to which Amelie says that it's just because she already knew he was capable of something like that. Amelie then says that she's not saying she isn't mad about it as she is actually very disappointed and angry right now. She mentions how she's totally being confined and watched over here. Amelie clenches her fist as she notes how she would have answered him truthfully if he ever asked anything and that she would not have left if he asked her not to. She notes how she thought they got closer in the past few days and wonders how he can still doubt her and that he must have sent all those gifts out of guilt. Amelie then speaks up saying that thinking about it only makes her more mad and that she knows what to do now. She decides to do whatever the hell she wants. She mentions that she's going to practice magic regardless of if His Majesty is sleeping or not and that she will hold his hand but won't sleep with him in the same bed anymore. Milena listens into all this as she notes how Amelie truly is a good person like Rowan said and that it seems as though Amelie will have a hard time adapting into life in the Imperial Palace. A flare lights up in Milena as she decides she will work even harder now to serve Lady Amelie with all that she has. We later hear birds call and see Amelie seated outside at a table with the head maid. Amelie glances over while she sips her drinks as she notes how she still cannot believe that Madame Menard isn't actually Count Minver's pawn. The madam sits silently not even drinking as Amelie recalls back to what Milena said. Milena says there is no way the madam works for the Count, especially since the Emperor visits Amelie every day. If the madam did work for the Count then rumors surely would have spread about Amelie already. Milena says that the madam surely has noticed how well His Majesty treats Amelie and has decided that it would be best to side idly and see how things play out for now. This is also why it would be best for Amelie to get the madam on her side and that Milena knows that the madam likes money so Amelie should draw her in with that. Amelie sits confused as she mentioned how she has none. They both then turn to the pile of gifts as Melina tells her they should use this situation as an opportunity. Amelie should ask the Madame to get rid of all these gifts from His Majesty. This is how Amelie can get the money she needs, and Madame Menard will get a new source of income that will cause her to surely keep this a secret and help Amelie. Amelie noted how Melina is so cunning as she now takes a large gulp while holding her cup with both hands. Amelie mentions how she feels bad about cashing in on the Emperor's gifts, but that he brought this upon himself. The Madame then startles Amelie as she then asks if Amelie is feeling under the weather or something. Amelie is hesitant before she then says that there is something on her mind lately. The Madame then says that she hopes it is not because Amelie finds it uncomfortable here. Amelie tells her that is not it before then mentioning how His Majesty has been sending her so many gifts recently. She then says that she'd like to give him something back in return, but that she has little to give. Amelie then says that she thought of selling the gifts as she is not going to use them so that she can buy something for His Majesty. Amelie asks what the Madame thinks of this. Amelie recalls mentioning to Melina how it'd be much easier to just ask the Madame to help her secure secret funds. She then wonders if she can ask this directly, to which Melina told her to be indirect as it gives the two parties a way out. The Madame mentions how it would be distasteful to sell gifts with sentimental meaning, but that His Majesty's gifts are mostly for daily convenience, so she thinks it'd be alright. Also that they would not even be able to use all the fabric anyways. Amelie then says she is relieved to hear the Madame say this, but that she personally does not know how to sell them. She asks if the Madame could help her since the Madame knows the ways of the palace and is quite capable. Amelie then starts to say she trusts, but someone then shouts that His Majesty has arrived. Amelie jolts up out of her seat in shock as Serwin then tells her to not make a fuss as he enters the area. Amelie's heart beats in horror as she nervously asks His Majesty what brings him her at this hour. Serwin in the meantime seems confused as he mentions how pale she is. He walks closer to her asking if something is wrong and if she feels ill. She says yes as internally notes how it's more like an ill conscience. The Emperor then asks why she is drinking tea if she is ill and then asks what the maids were doing. He coldly asks if they are blind and if they could not see that she was unwell. Amelie then tells His Majesty that it is not like that before saying she just wanted to get fresh air and would now like to go to her room and rest now. The Madame stares intently as Serwin asks if he should call a doctor, to which Amelie says that she is fine and will feel better after some rest. Later, while seated on the bed, Serwin asks if she is sure she does not want a doctor. She tells him that she has just been stressed about something and it upset her stomach. Internally, she notes how it seems like he did not hear the conversation. Serwin then notes how she is stressed and asks if anyone has been bothering her. He then asks who dares to give her trouble. Amelie thinks about how angry he seems and is quite baffled. She wonders if he's serious since he has no right to be angry as he was the one who decided not to trust her. She clenches her fist as she wonders if he really does not know who's been stressing her out. She then springs up standing as she asks who he thinks it is and then says it is him. He questions this as Amelie gives him a glare, thinking about how he locked her up in here and still has no clue what he's done. She also thinks of how he does whatever he wants and that she should be able to do as she pleases as well. Serwin then calls Amelie's name in confusion before she then internally says to take this as transformation magic now occurs. The smoke around her blows as she seems to get confused. Her shadow can be seen as she wonders why she feels bigger than a bird now. She is then alarmed as we then see she has become a rabbit. Internally, she wonders why everything is going wrong and why she had to turn into an animal that can't even fly. She looks up as Serwin then asks why she even turned into an animal and then tells her to revert back to being human. She is defiant as she then hides under the bed and mentions how she'd rather be there than see his face right now. He leans over as he asks Amelie what is wrong and tells her that she should not go under there. He offers her his hand as she tells her to come out. She notes how dare he as she then smacks his hand away with her hind legs. Serwin then seems stunned as he wonders to himself if she just rejected him. He is now panicking and nervous as he tells her that he won't know why she's under the bed if she does not tell him. He asks for them to talk about it. Amelie turns her head away as she notes how she will not move from this spot and that he should think about what he did. Someone then calls for His Majesty saying it's time for a meeting, to which he says damn it. He then leans over telling Amelie that he will be back in the evening and tells her they will talk about it face to face then. He goes outside and notes how this must be the maid that knows Amelie is a witch. He tells that maid to go in and check on Amelie. Melina slams the door shut behind her as she gets confused and calls for Lady Amelie. She is then stunned as Amelie hops right in front of her, noting it is Melina. Melina holds Amelie up as she notes that this pink fur must mean it's Amelie. She then calls Amelie cute and mentions how she just wants to kiss the rabbit now. Outside, someone is knocking and asking Lady Amelie if they can come in. Melina says it is Madame Menard, and it seems as though the madam wants to continue speaking on the deal. Later we see Melina excusing herself out as she thinks of how cute the rabbit was. Amelie pats herself off while being nervous. Amelie then thinks of how she is sure the madam is here about the secret funds and wonders what the madam will say. The madam then starts to bring it up as Amelie says yes. The madam then tells Amelie to make His Majesty a personal gift like an embroidered handkerchief. Amelie asks really as she then wonders if the madam is saying no to the deal. The madam tells Amelie it would mean more if she used the fabric he sent as well. She tells Amelie that she will go gather funds from the sold items for gold and silver threads as well. Amelie clenches her fist as she notes how Madame Menard is in, and the madam then asks Amelie if she needs anything else. Amelie recalls how Melina told her to double check to see if the madam truly agreed and that misunderstandings later would be bad. Amelie then says that will be all and that she'd like to be alone now. Amelie notes how Serwin told the madam to not leave Amelie's side, so if the madam takes her order over Serwin's, then that means she's accepted the request. The madam is silent before she then bows saying yes Amelie and that she will be on her way. This stuns our female lead as she looks to see the madam closing the door with a creak. Amelie speechless for a bit at this before springing up and saying that it worked. She notes how she cannot believe the treacherous madam has agreed to work for her. It may not seem like much, but this feels like the first time since she got here that she's been able to spend some time alone. A really fancy brush is used to prepare Amelie's hair as Melina tells Amelie that she has done very well today. Amelie thanks Melina saying it was all due to Melina's advice. Melina then says she told Amelie she could be trusted. Amelie then gets confused as she asks why the madam is so obsessed with making money anyways, especially since the madam is willing to go so far as to disobey His Majesty for it. Melina then gives it a thought as she then starts to say that almost everyone knows this. It is that Madame Menard has a daughter who has contracted an illness that people still do now know exactly what it is. The madam has brought doctors from far and wide and fed her daughter all sorts of rare medicinal herbs. This was all, however, never enough, and regardless of how much the madam would make, the madam seems to always have financial difficulties. Amelie then asks if the madam has any other family, to which Melina says that the madam's husband died long ago due to the plague. The madam does receive support from both sides of her family, but that does not help much. Amelie looks down as she notes how things must be hard on the madam. Melina then reminds Amelie that it is likely that the madam's plight will eventually lead her to sell Amelie out one day as well, so Amelie does not need to sympathize too much. Melina puts the brush down as Amelie mentions how she understands this, but that it would feel nice to be of some help. Melina then hands Amelie a mirror as she says that is true, especially since if Amelie gets the madam to be her ally, then Amelie could move freely in the palace. Amelie then mentions how she wants to try and cure the daughter with some magic potion. Melina then calls that too dangerous and asks what if Amelie gets found out. Even after helping the madam, there's no telling what the madam would do with the knowledge of Amelie being a witch. Amelie then mentions how the ultimate goal of the madam is to cure her daughter, though, to which Melina says the madam likely will just make a new goal. Maybe something like giving her daughter dresses with jewelry and gold or something. Amelie holds the mirror as she says that may be true. Melina then says that it might be better for Amelie to just make potions for herself. Amelie then responds by saying she's been thinking about a fly potion since her broom broke and all. Melina seems excited as she asks if witches really fly on brooms and calls it amazing and wishes to see it one day. Amelie laughs as she wonders to herself if Melina is saying this to make Amelie feel better. Amelie then notes she should listen to Melina, especially since she still has her own business to deal with and probably should not meddle in other people's businesses. Amelie stares in the mirror as Melina says she will get something comfy for Amelie to wear. Later in the hall we see a lot of murmuring going on. The Emperor sits silent on his throne as the next agenda gets announced. The announcer calls to His Majesty as Serwin then says to continue and that he is listening. In reality, Serwin is hoping that Amelie has come out from under the bed and how she must have found out she's getting watched, but that it was necessary. He internally notes how none of the nobles would take kindly to her and that they would all target her if they knew of her existence. He notes how he knows she feels trapped, but that he does not want to risk her being seen while wandering outside the palace. He then notes how if she were a small animal, though, there would be no such concern. The Emperor then says that is enough for today, to the announcer's confusion. His Majesty is then seen stepping out with his men. The people murmur as they note how they'd never seen His Majesty storm out like that. They wonder what is going on and how it must be serious if it's making His Majesty all worried. Someone then asks Count Minvers if he knows anything about this. The Count does recall hearing that His Majesty was in that one part of the palace before coming to the audience chamber. He notes how this must be why Serwin could not focus the whole time and wonders what is making him so preoccupied. The creepy guy from before then notes how everyone is curious about the prize His Majesty brought back from his recent hunting trip. The guy then says the Count must also be wondering as well. The Count wonders what Marquis Lewin wants and how this guy usually is not one to start conversation. The Count turns saying he's sure Lewin would know, especially since Lewin is of imperial descent. The Count also says he is nothing compared to Lewin when it comes to news reports. The Count then asks what he means by prize, to which Lewin mentions how the Count has a knack for flattery. Lewin continues to say he does not know all details, but that he heard the prize has long pink hair. The Count is stunned as he notes how Lewin said hair and not fur, which causes him to wonder if this is a woman. He notes how this cannot be since everyone usually avoids the Emperor, so he had thought his daughter would be the Empress one day. It is noted that his power mainly stems from people believing Lenia would marry His Majesty someday, but now there is another woman. This would be a big problem, so the Count decides to find out if this girl is capable of pushing his daughter aside to be Empress. He then thinks back to how Madame Menard is serving in the part of the palace and that he'll make use of her. He notes how this is a woman who would do anything for her daughter. He notes how he cannot cure the illness, but that he does not really have to. He just needs to look the part up until he gets the info he needs. A laugh can then be heard as the Count looks up stunned. Lewin says to excuse him and that he will leave first. The people around Lewin glaze him as they ask how he got the info. The Count notes how this man is clearly belittling him and mentions how dare he. Later we see Amelie silent in a room as she thinks about how she should make a flying potion. She notes how it seems like a good idea as she puts her hand gently in the air. She thinks of how it's simple to make and a chance to practice magic. It also would be quick and better than wasting her time like this. Serwin has then entered the room and he starts to call her name but stops. She is silent in front of him, still in her train of thought about magic tools. He stares into her dazed eyes as the Emperor's heart drops as he wonders what she is thinking so hard about. He then shouts her name out loud, which stuns her. She turns and calls to His Majesty as he then stands speechless. He mentions how he saw her looking out the window and asked if she'd like to go outside. She notes the word as she thinks of how awkward she feels from this morning. She also still feels bad for using his gifts to win over the madam. She stands in awkward silence as the Emperor notes how she won't even look at him or answer him. He sighs as he mentions how he brought this upon himself. He then tells her that he just realized how it's been a while since he's gone outside to see the capital. He tells her he'd like to show her around. She asks if he really means it, to which he tells her she needs to be an animal until they pass the palace gate. She may turn back though when they reach the market. She seems confused as she notes how he won't even let her wander the palace, but now is offering to take her to the capital. She wonders what he is up to. He then asks her if that is a no, to which she gasps. She says that's not it and that she'd like to go. She tells him she will get ready right away and asks if she should bring anything with her. She thinks of how this dress is too flashy and will need something modest. She also thinks about whether Renee gave her any pocket money. Serwin stands in silence as Amelie notes how she does not know and probably should ask Milena. Serwin watches as he breathes a sigh of relief as Amelie is finally smiling again. She's so beautiful in a black dress. Milena lets out a gasp as she wonders if Amelie really is going to go out tonight. She paces around the room nervously as she says something casual would have been better for a light outing, but that they don't have anything prepared for Amelie yet. Milena wonders what they should do and if it would be okay for Amelie to wear Milena's clothes. Amelie tries to calm the maid down, saying it's fine, and thanks Milena for the effort. Amelie then stands, saying she wonders why His Majesty wants to go out with her. Despite this, she was actually very excited to hear this suggestion of his. Milena says she does not know for sure, but a theory would be that His Majesty is maybe just trying to make Lady Amelie feel better. Amelie weighs this off, saying that is impossible, to which Milena then mentions how His Majesty is human though. Milena continues to say His Majesty may have possibly changed his mind after seeing how stressed Amelie was, especially seeing as to how Amelie changed into a bunny and ran from him today. The thought of this embarrasses Amelie as Milena then grabs the witch's hand, saying that whatever the reason is, she just hopes Amelie has a lot of fun. Milena mentions how this is the first time Amelie is getting to tour the capital and will finally be able to go outside. Amelie thinks about how the maid is right and that she's finally going to go out. The background of the palace can be seen as it is nighttime outside. The horse rides through the night as we see a hooded man aboard the black horse. It turns out to be Serwin in disguise with a certain pink rabbit right next to him. The rabbit looks around before then saying wow as she sees the well-lit city and calls the night view pretty. To the shock of Serwin, Amelie suddenly reverts back to her human form as she notes to herself how Delahaim pales in comparison to this place. Serwin then yells to Amelie about how she'll startle the horse undoing her spells like this. The horse then gets wild and neighs loudly. Amelie is later seen huffing and puffing as she mentions how she thought she was gonna fall off. A hand then reaches for her as Serwin says he can honestly not tell whether she is fearless or just plain reckless. He lifts her up off the horse before she then says sorry, and he asks if she is hurt anywhere. Amelie tells him no, but internally she feels so embarrassed about that. Serwin then offers his hand to her as he asks if they shall go now then. Amelie tugs up the hood over her head before then holding his hands and saying sure. The pair then walk into the well-lit capital as Amelie yells wow. She mentions how bright it is this late at night and how many shops and people are here. Serwin tells her this is the capital and that the streets will be lit even if no one is outside. This is why things are so lively at this hour. Amelie's attention is then caught by a man wearing a swan hat as she asks His Majesty if this is the latest fashion trend. She then wonders what would happen if she appeared before the nobles wearing that. Serwin mentions how he'll buy it for her if she wants to, which she passes on the offer. She then yells about how the instruments over there are playing on their own. He tells her it is magic as the ring is filled with mana stones. Amelie finds this pretty as we then see her staring while feeling amazed at the sights before her. The man with the instruments bows to the applause of the crowd surrounding him. Amelie then turns to Serwin and asks if he leaves the palace often. To this Serwin asks why she wants to know and questions if she'd like him to take her along next time as well. Amelie notes how he catches on fast before saying if that is possible. Serwin tells her perhaps, but that with her around he'd barely get any work done. She asks why, to which he tells her he'd probably spend all his time looking at her instead. He then mentions how he thinks it might be fun though and that maybe he'd bring a tour guide with them on their next outing. Amelie replies by asking why His Majesty is being so nice to her today. He asks her why and if she thinks this is unlike his normal self. Amelie then nervously tries to say she didn't mean that. She then playfully reminds him about how tense things were between the both of them this morning and how she thought he was trying to cheer her up. She mentions how if that's the case she personally wants to thank him. Serwin then says if she truly is thankful then to not hide under the bed next time. He mentions how if she decides to hide again, then to do it under the table or somewhere maybe a bit less dusty. This leaves our female lead speechless and she looks over at Serwin who is walking off. She then has a stunned look on her face as she wonders if he really did actually bring her here to make her feel better. She wonders if that really is it and how she cannot believe he is being considerate of someone else. The very next day we hear the birds chirping in the morning. Someone tells Amelie that they will be taking their leave now. The door then clacks closed and Amelie gets excited to see that Madame Menard has left. She then hops about the room humming and feeling great today, especially having gotten to see the capital yesterday. She mentions how she won't waste a good day like this. The window is opened as we see Melina ask if the madam has left. Amelie apologizes to Melina for asking her to do this on her day off. To this Melina tells Amelie it is fine but that Amelie has to let her watch the potion making process. She then asks if Amelie enjoyed the capital tour, to which Amelie joyfully says it was a blast and all thanks to Melina. Melina then presents Amelie with the lard, sunflower oil, and prunes that Amelie asked for. Amelie thanks the maid before the maid tells her they were not hard to find and mentions how she had thought the ingredients would have been something more wild like frog entrail. Amelie tells her the items Melina brought were the supplementary ones and that she already has the main ingredients from home. They are henbane and wolfsbane. Melina mentions how these are poisonous plants though and people would be executed for even having them here at the palace. This causes our female lead to gasp, asking if that's true, and mentions how poisonous plants can have medicinal effects as well. Melina says they are still poisonous herbs entering the palace and can be used on the emperor. Amelie then wonders what she should do as some potions need even more of these plants. To this Melina loudly questions if there's more and tells Amelie to not let anyone know she has them because she could be in real trouble. Amelie then ponders about how everyone seems to have differing opinions on these herbs, but then again she'd likely suspect anyone who brought plants like this into the palace herself. She then has a realization. She mentions to Melina how they both wanted to know why His Majesty was acting so strange. Melina lifts a pot up saying yes they did before Amelie tells Melina her hunch was right. She tells the maid Serwin said he did it to make Amelie feel better. Melina questions if that really is true before saying even she is surprised by this and that she did not know His Majesty had such a human side. Amelie agrees with this, saying she couldn't sleep due to how surprised she was. She mentions how after saying this Serwin then walked on without saying a word until they returned to the palace. Amelie wonders if he got embarrassed. She then bursts her thought bubble as she says there is no way and that she should just focus on making potions right now. Amelie then yells for Melina to look over here as Melina then yells about the smoke and to open the windows. A few days would pass and we see a couple of sparkling bottles on the table. Amelie is smiling as she mentions how they made so many potions and even a new broomstick. She is proud of herself, and due to her being on good terms with Madame Menard, she's been able to practice her magic and has been feeling great lately. She then groans, thinking about how she feels bad selling Serwin's gifts, and even if he can't find out, she still feels guilt. A loud knock can then be heard at the door as someone yells Amelie's name and says it's Milena. Milena dashes in as Amelie asks how was the potion she had given Milena. Milena tells Amelie this is not important right now. Madame Menard has met up with Count Minvers. This stuns the female lead, who had thought Madame Menard was on her side. Amelie asks what does Milena mean by the two people meeting. To this, Milena says the truth is that she had hired Madame Menard's neighbor to keep an eye on the woman. Amelie asks if Milena is even allowed to do this, to which Milena says that is not the point and that she did it because she knew Madame Menard would sell Amelie out any day if she really needed to do it. Milena continues to say that recently the neighbors have caught Count Minvers along with a suspicious old woman entering the house of Madame Menard. The neighbor then met up with one of Enard's maids, who said that the old lady had fed Enard's daughter with some medicine and then chanted a strange spell. The more surprising thing is that the young girl stopped coughing and seemed to recover. She was even seen eating and laughing as well. When the old woman saw the maidservant, she laughed and claimed to be a witch. Amelie questions if they really said witch, to which Milena says yes, but that it's not really clear if she actually is one. Amelie thinks about the idea of a witch being here in the capital and how she had given up trying to find other witches after coming here. She notes how she cannot even believe she is hearing about one right now. Milena then says that whatever happened, she is sure that Count Minvers only helped Enard because he wanted more info about Amelie. Milena mentions how Amelie must alert His Majesty about this. Amelie tells Milena to wait and mentions how if Enard is arrested, then no one will care for her daughter. She thinks about how if Serwin finds out, she'll be executed, and then says that either way this is not going to end well. Milena tries to protest, but Amelie thinks to herself about how she is shocked that Enard had betrayed her, but she does not wish to bring Enard any more grief just for trying to save her family. You are too kind for this world, Amelie. I love you. Amelie then thinks about the old woman and how she had never heard about a witch who chants spells to use magic. She notes how there is so much more she has to learn about magic and would really like to meet this woman if she's a witch, as she may have valuable info. Amelie tells Milena to keep this a secret since they will need more time. Milena tries to protest, but Amelie pleads with her. Milena gives in, saying if this is really what Lady Amelie wants. We see bottles clinking in the back before a hand reaches out the window to open it. Amelie sits prettily on a broom as she thinks about how she has all the potions and seems to have everything she needs. She recalls sprinkling on some confusion potion at the door, so whoever tries to get in this room will just walk away. We then see the effects of the potion demonstrated as a maid is about to go inside to do some work, but then walks away wondering why she is even here. Narrator interjection, but it all makes sense now. Someone must be using this potion on me every time I wake up or when it's time to write the first sentence of an essay. Amelie then gets enraged, questioning if Serwin can see this, and mentions how she could have done this all along but chose not to. She thinks about how he did at least try to make her feel better and supposes she'll let this one slide. She then taps at the window with her feet before saying let's go. She then flies off into the air gracefully through the lush green surroundings. Her eyes then turn to a building as she thinks about how the madam's house should be around here somewhere based on what the other maid said. She descends closer down to the ground as she recalls how they also said only the daughter and a maidservant are at the house when Enard is working at the palace. She looks for a way to get in before seeing an open window and deciding to enter in through here. A big poof can then be heard as we see a fuzzy red rabbit leap in through the window. The rabbit stops for a moment and looks inside with confusion. She sees someone is snoring very loudly and notes how this woman is clearly slacking off and that the house is a mess as well. She then hops about the place thinking about how this will make things easier for her though. Amelie notes how she must check if the old woman truly is a witch and to see how the girl is doing right now. She hops up the staircase as she hopes this girl is the one, and if that is the case she may be able to meet a fellow witch. Her feet then land on the floor as she wonders if this is the child's room. She then looks ahead as she wonders if this is Madame Enard's daughter. Amelie continues to hop as she recalls this girl's name to be Ellie and that she is 10 years old despite looking about 8 right now. She mentions how the girl is just sitting there with a book open and does not appear to be reading it. On closer inspection, our female lead sees the girl's pupils are dilated and that she is strangely not reacting to a rabbit at all. Amelie then sees a grassy scent that is coming from the girl's mouth and then realizes that she knows this smell. It is a poison and a really potent one at that. They had fed the poor girl some poison. Amelie wonders how could they do this, and that this not only puts the girl in danger but also endangers the reputation and safety of real witches. Amelie clenches her fists as she thinks about how she will not let this fraud of a witch get away with this. Light shines on the building as we later see the door burst open and a maid saying that the child looks much better after the old woman's last visit. The maid mentions how calm the girl is as the ugly old hag giggles. Amelie is hiding in the corner as she notes how they are here. She looks up thinking about how this must be the witch. The hag tells Ellie here you go and that it is time for medication. Ellie moves her head away to the shock of the hag. This causes the unhinged nutcase to call Ellie a brat and tell her to hurry and drink it. She tells Ellie to take it so she can finish her job already. She yells for the maid to help hold them down as the maid agrees. Amelie watches as she realizes Ellie does not want this. She then leaps internally yelling stop. She internally yells again to stop it as she headbutts the crazy old lady. The woman yells asking what a rabbit is doing here. Amelie then sees the cup on the floor and mentions how she'll need that as evidence. She moves head thinking about how she must not let it shatter. We then see that she has transformed and catches the bottle yelling alright and that she caught it. This then leaves the two other women in the room completely stunned. They yell that it is a witch in front of them as Amelie's full figure is seen. Amelie then uses the force on the rotten hag, lifting her up in the air and calling her a fraud. The old hag yells to have mercy as her wig then slips off her egghead dome. This stuns Amelie, who wonders what this is as the supposed woman then drops to the floor. The person yells about their wig as Amelie then yells that they not only are not a witch but also are a bald man. Amelie then asks how dare they pretend to be a witch and yell that they are an imposter and fraud. She says she will not forgive them as she then throws them up and down the air like a ping pong ball. The idiot then kneels to the floor saying to please not kill him and that he was only following orders. Amelie questions this as the egg then asks how a powerless man like him could refuse the orders of a noble. They continue to say they were told to just dress up as a witch and pretend to heal up the girl to gain the mother's trust. Amelie then calls that person a despicable non-monetizable word. She clenches her fist as she wonders how they could take advantage of someone who is fighting for their lives and calls this unforgivable. The egg then asks if this means he is forgiven before Amelie then says the same applies to him. She says he must pay for what he has done. A loud bang can then be heard as there is a noise coming from outside. The door burst open as Madame Menard burst in yelling her daughter's name. She asks what in the world is going on as she then asks what Amelie is doing here. Madame Menard yells asking what in the world is going on here. Her daughter then starts to cough as Madame Menard rushes in yelling my goodness. She holds her coughing daughter asking if she is alright and to wait just a moment. She tells Ellie that she will go get the medicine from the witch to make her feel better. Amelie yells to wait saying to not give her that medicine and that the witch is a crook. She starts to say she can help but Madame Menard yells back at Amelie. Menard questions who Amelie thinks she is suddenly showing up at this house saying that she can help. Amelie is stunned by this rebuttal as Ellie starts to cough again, distracting the madam. Amelie then moves over to the boiled egg still on the floor telling it to explain the situation to the madam. The egg turns its head over saying he does not know what Amelie is talking about. This enrages our female lead who lifts the idiot into the airing and yells to stop lying. She asks if the egg wants to get scrambled again. The egg screams in the air saying he will explain everything. He then proceeds to do exactly that as the madam sits stunned. He mentions that Count Minvers had told him to disguise as a witch and pretend to be healing the child. The Count had mentioned how he'd give a large reward for all this. The Count has also said that Madame Menard would never find out so this would be an easy job and that the money offered was nothing like he'd ever seen before. This leaves the madam further stunned as she questions how Ellie did get better after taking the medication. Amelie joins the conversation saying the concoction given to Ellie was made with a dangerous ingredient. It had only made Ellie look like she was getting better but that the poison would have eventually paralyzed all the senses and put the madam's daughter into a coma over time. Amelie then presents a jar saying the madam can take it to have it tested if she would like. She also says that the madam has probably already noticed but that Amelie is a real witch and is actually able to help Ellie. The madam says this cannot be and recalls how she was being extra careful as well. A flashback occurs to when the madam tells another person to not visit them at the palace. The other man tells the madam that they do not know what she means and that they are here as a humble servant to his majesty. Enard tells him she'd like to keep this chat short. The man tells her he was wondering if the doctor who visited her daughter recently was able to cure the child. He tells her that orthodox methods may not work so she should consider trying an alternative. He knows a witch he can introduce her to. The madam starts to say there is no need for that but he interrupts saying she should not lose this chance to save her child just because she feels uncomfortable. It's also not like she will be able to find help elsewhere. He mentions how he also knows all her friends and family reproach her for being so crazy about money. He mentions how they all don't know she's only doing this for the sake of her daughter and that he is not like those people and just wants to help. He just wishes for her to hand over a bit of information in return. The madam mentions at first finding it funny that she would believe the count after all she has seen. However, it was after the old woman visited and the medicine showed some positive effects. We see the madam pleased that Ellie was able to eat more than yesterday and mentions how she might be able to finish the whole bowl tomorrow. The madam was so grateful that the treatment seemed to be working. She had just wanted everything to be back to normal and that nothing else mattered to her. She can be seen asking the maid how Ellie did today, as the maid says the medicine works wonders as the child did not cry or peep all day and that taking care of her is easier now. The madam had noticed how the maidservant saw Ellie as an inconvenience, but with the costs of medication and living she was unable to find another maid. She also could not leave her daughter home alone, so she decided to endure for a bit more. The maid very often would sleep on the job. The madam had told herself that everything would be alright if Ellie just held on a bit longer. She might have already noticed that Ellie's hands had remained ice cold and her face pale white. Yet the madam just wanted to believe that her daughter was finally getting better. In the present, Ellie is getting fed before then starting to blink and then dropping off to sleep. The madam asks what is wrong with Ellie, to which Amelie says to calm down as Ellie's body is detoxifying and that she has just gone to sleep. The madam lunges over right beside her dear sleeping daughter. Amelie looks from afar as she notes how the madam always seemed cold and distant and that she did not expect to see this side of her. The madam then speaks up asking what it is that Amelie wants then. Amelie says excuse me to this, as Madame Menard then mentions how Amelie is likely only doing this because she wants something. She mentions how she is fully aware of her position and how people talk a lot about her, so she is useful. The madam then says if that is not the case, then is this some type of retribution? She mentions how since Amelie is here, then the madam must have been found out and asks if she would await punishment for disobeying the emperor and selling Amelie's information. Amelie thinks about how wrong it was for the madam to sell her out, but she clenches her fist as she then says she doesn't want anything. The madam questions this statement as Amelie then says her family is the reason she came to this palace. She mentions how she always tried to run away out of fear of what might happen, but that she could not leave the people who said they'd always be there for her. She couldn't. Also, if the things that the madam did to save her daughter led to her downfall, that would be far too heartbreaking. This leaves the madam stunned as Amelie then says she should get going and that the madam looks like she needs some time to herself. She mentions how if Ellie needs more medicine then to just let her know. The madam is still speechless as we later see her leaning over to be with her daughter. Amelie looks off in silence before we then see her flying off on the magical broomstick. As she moves through the air, she hopes she has not made a mistake by helping the madam and telling people she is a witch. She thinks about how Milena may have been right about not sympathizing too much with the madam, especially since her plight makes her prone to selling out. Also, Serwin had told her this palace is a dangerous place with everyone having problems they don't speak about to others. The madam may only be grateful for now, but could turn on her again in an instant. Amelie then has another thought. Worrying is not going to solve a thing, and that she already said she would change things despite it not being easy. She decides to no longer think about it, but just then the bottle in her bag clunks around. She then yells for it to be quiet as she was just in the middle of organizing all of her thoughts. The rotten eggs is in tears, telling Amelie to please have mercy on him. She mentions to him that if he thinks hard about what he has done, then she might release him someday. Amelie then scoffs internally as she floats back to the castle, thinking about how she will no longer run from her problems. Milena looks at Amelie shocked as she asks if Amelie really went to the madam's house. Milena lets out a gasp as Amelie nervously starts to answer. The whole summary of the situation is then told to the maid, who then makes a comedic face. She is still shell-shocked by this admission as she stands stunned. Later we see the other maids confused as Milena still stands shocked, wiping the curtains with a wet rag. They then try to stop her as she starts to pour something into the pot. The other maids decide to take Milena outside to get some fresh air and ask Milena what has gotten into her today. As she sits outside, Milena thinks about how Madame Menard now knows that Amelie's a witch. She notes how Madame Menard has expertise, talent, and status, but that there is not a soul in the castle that has yet to hear about the Madame's money scandals. This woman can go straight to Count Menevers right now and out Lady Amelie as a witch. If that were to happen, then there would be nowhere that Amelie could run. Milena then thinks about how she does understand what Lady Amelie is saying as well.